Chapter 271. Mom, Grandma, have some tea. In the central room, Chiu Meng and Mrs. Gu looked at Su Li, who was kneeling on the ground, and took the tea. Their eyes flashed with love. Especially Chiu Meng, she really liked Su Li from the bottom of her heart. One of you is Ling Li, and the other is Su Li. I don't know how to address you. Su Li, since you are willing to marry my grandson, the Ling family will treat you well. You will also have a share of the property of the Ling family. Mrs. Gu said, and took out a stack of shop deeds. It seemed that she was going to completely hand over some of the property of the Ling family to Su Li. Su Li was stunned and quickly waved her hand. Grandma, I just got married. How can I accept the property of the family? I can't accept it. If you really want to give it to me, just give it to my husband. Hearing this, both Mrs. Gu and Chiu Meng were stunned, especially Chiu Meng, who was deeply moved. The value of the shop deeds given by Mrs. Gu was not low. They almost accounted for a quarter of the property of the Ling family. Even if it was presented to Lord Rue, it would be important. But Su Li refused without hesitation. This child really likes an heir. Mrs. Gu was also satisfied. She was determined to give up a quarter of the property to help Ling Li and to show Lord Rue. But it was also a kind of test. If Su Li immediately accepted it happily, she would not like this little girl. But from the moment she refused, she had really regarded Su Li as a member of the Ling family. Okay, don't kneel. Chiu Meng couldn't help helping Su Li up. She pulled Su Li and said, the breakfast is ready. It is made by your grandma. Your grandma hasn't cooked for many years. Ling Li helplessly watched Su Li being pulled away by his mother. It was just a day after they got married. His status in the family was not much better than that of ordinary servants. If mother knows that it is just a play between Su Li and me, Ling Li sighed and didn't dare to think about it. Li. After Chiu Meng and Su Li left, there were only two people in the room. It was Mrs. Gu, Gu Yan. Ling Li turned his head and braced himself to say, Grandma, what can I do for you? Gu Yan's expression was serious, and her voice was piercingly cold, with a bit of the murderous spirit of youth. Su Li is a good daughter, and you can't let her down. In the past, you were young and unmarried, so I couldn't control how you spent your time. But now that you are married and have a family, my Ling family values sincerity. If you dare to go to that kind of place again, I won't recognize you as my grandson. Gu Yan's words were serious, and Ling Li couldn't help but be moved. Although he was a little, he didn't care. Ling Li couldn't help but be angry. He grinned and moved his wheelchair closer to Gu Yan's side. He laughed and said, Grandson will remember. Grandma, don't be angry. Mother and the others have gone to eat. Let's go too. Gu Yan saw Ling Li's reaction. It was clear that he didn't take her words seriously. A trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. She shook her head and got up to walk to the table, but she didn't see Ling Li behind her. He was more than serious. Everything he said was true. The breakfast of the Ling family was extremely rich, and the four people had a good time eating together. Su Li behaved very naturally and didn't let Chiu Meng and Mrs. Gu see any flaws. Ling Li ate quietly, but he felt bitter in his heart. These dishes were picked by Su Li. He knew that Su Li was just acting. As long as they were alone, she would be beaten back to the original state. But he still couldn't help but hope that everything in front of him was true. How good it would be. After dinner, Su Li followed Ling Li back to the east courtyard. Ling Li had been living in seclusion for more than half a year. It was said that he changed his lecherous habits for Su Li, so no one thought it was strange. When they returned to the east courtyard, they happened to meet the maids who were cleaning the room. Ling Li glanced at them and was about to go to the study. He saw a maid open the soft cloth on the bed and took out a piece of white cloth dyed with red. Then she hurried away. What's that? Ling Li was slightly shocked and quickly thought of something. But before he could respond, he found that his right arm was held by someone and dragged to the other side. At the same time, Su Li whispered in his ear, Honey, aren't you going to show me the collection in the study today? What are you doing? When his right arm touched the softness, Ling Li was a little confused and was immediately dragged away by Su Li. The maids envied them again. Master and Madam are inseparable. They are really in love. At this time, the two people who were in love came to the study, but they immediately separated. The atmosphere gradually became stagnant. Ling Li frowned and couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter with the red?" Although he had never intercourse with women in his 2 lives, the information on the earth was so advanced in the previous life. Even if he didn't try it himself, he naturally knew the secrets between men and women. Last night, they didn't consummate. How could there be red? Su Li looked indifferent and turned her back as if she was looking at the books in the room. She said, "If we don't do this, how can we confuse the fake with the real one? It's just a little blood. Don't worry about it." Ling Li became more and more annoyed. His eyes darkened and he stood up directly from the wheelchair. He pulled Su Li's right arm and pulled the sleeve. The strength of the inborn warrior was so great that Su Li's right sleeve was completely torn, revealing a fresh wound. "It should be yesterday. Don't you apply medicine to such a deep wound." Ling Li finally knew where the red came from. He was angry and distressed. When he was about to use genuine energy to treat Su Li, he was pushed away by Su Li. Her cold words pierced his heart like a knife. "You don't need to be hypocritical. I have said that. Except in front of outsiders, we don't interfere with each other. As the hierarch, you are busy. I won't bother you anymore. I will come back in the evening." Then Su Li directly opened the tunnel mechanism in the room, jumped down and disappeared. Ling Li stood alone on the edge of the tunnel. After a long time, he raised his head and looked serious. He said, "Li has reached the inborn 9th hurdle. Why didn't the wound heal itself after one night?" Even though every word of Su Li made his heart bleed since they met, he didn't complain at all. He was still worried about Su Li's safety. Except for Ling Li himself, no one knew what he was thinking about. Lin Li Building. On the first day of Su Li's wedding, the door of the Lin Li Building was closed. In the underground addendum, all the leaders of the Lin Li Building sat in a circle, including Wen Tingshan. Su Li has no choice but to marry into the Ling mansion. This matter is urgent. No one knows what Su Li thinks. What should we do in the future? Chu Qingning sighed and said the confusion in everyone's heart. Fang Yuan looked up at him. His eyes were dim and he didn't speak. "The Yinma cult is the culprit who killed my junior sister apprentice. Su Li can't be willing to marry into the Ling family. Now it's just a temporary measure. What are you worried about?" When Tingshan snorted. Although he had the shortest contact with Su Li, he was extremely confident in Su Li's temperament. Ling Li is the hierarch of the Yinma cult. Now Su Li is risking her life to marry him. "We are also worried. We don't know when we can see her again," Fang Mu said faintly. Yin Xuetong and Mei Ruhan were lost. As women, they could understand Su Li better. At this moment, Su Li must be very uncomfortable. But she couldn't tell Dongfang Rui all this. She could only bear it by herself. "What are you talking about? Why are you so noisy?" Suddenly, the door of the addendum was opened. A figure in white appeared in front of everyone without warning. Everyone was stunned. "Su Li! Su Li!" Fang Yuan trembled slightly and looked back incredulously. It was only the first morning of the wedding. Su Li came to the Lin Li Building openly? "But you seem to be very surprised." Su Li sat down expressionlessly and poured herself a cup of tea. She said indifferently, "It's just a temporary measure to marry into the Ling family. There is no possibility between me and Ling Li. This time I just used him." That, Yin Xuetong stammered and looked at Su Li's lower body. Her face was red. What she meant couldn't be more obvious. Su Li's reaction was very calm. She just shook her head slightly and said, "It's just cooperation. How can I consummate with him?" Hearing this, Chu Qingning and others couldn't help but cough. Although Su Li was open-minded and didn't care about it, they couldn't help but feel embarrassed when they heard such explicit words. Fang Yuan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But then he felt that the situation was more serious. Although Su Li took advantage of Ling Li's love for her to hide in the Ling mansion, if it went on like this, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't. He knew very well that Su Li liked Ling Li very much. If it weren't for that thing, she would have loved Ling Li. Thinking of this, he took a breath and changed the topic. "What should we do next?" Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and knocked on the table with her knuckles. She glanced at Wen Tingshan, who was silent, and said, "The top priority is to clear up the worries. How is the investigation of the Wanjian sect going?" Yin Xuetong shook her head and said disappointedly, "We have cooperated with the Yinma cult, but we still can't find any clues of the Wanjian sect. The people of the Wanjian sect probably left." "Really?" Su Li didn't say yes or no. A glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. "They are not under the protection of the royal family and can avoid the investigation of me and the Yinma cult. If they are still in Yunjing City, there is only one place left. Where else can they go?" Chu Qingning frowned. He didn't know where the people of the Wanjian sect could hide. But when Tingshan's face suddenly changed at this moment, "You mean," Su Li smiled coldly, "the spiritual realm. When did the spiritual realm, which has always been indifferent to worldly affairs, intervene in the disputes of the sect? Uncle Shan, it seems that the group of people chasing you is more complicated than I thought." Chapter 272. When Tingshan glanced at the confused people, but he didn't mean to explain immediately. Instead, he thought for a moment and said, "Su Li, the situation may not be as serious as you think. The spiritual realm has never cared about the affairs of the world. It doesn't care about the life and death of the forces in the spiritual circle. When Tinggi's people probably stayed in the spiritual realm by special means." "What do you mean?" Su Li had a vague guess in her heart, but she still asked. When Tingshan couldn't help standing up and said, "Let's go there immediately and tell you the details on the way." "I'll go too." Fang Yuan stood up and stared at Su Li with a pair of black eyes firmly. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she suddenly had an idea. She immediately swallowed her refusal and nodded, "Well, let's go now." All three of them were seniors. It was the fastest way to go there, but Su Li needed to save her foundation, so she chose to use a carriage instead of walking. Although when Tingshan didn't know Su Li's intention, he agreed and explained the reason on the way. "When Tinggi is my younger brother. Although we are close relatives, he is indifferent and narrow-minded. His martial arts realm is naturally lower than mine. Not only him, but all the martial artists in the 10,000 Swords Pavilion who are still active should respect me." Fang Yuan was shocked by Wen Tingshan's first sentence. Wen Tingshan was the only senior in the longevity realm in the Linli building. Although he knew he was powerful, he didn't expect that he was the first senior in the Wanjian sect. Su Li nodded expressionlessly and said, "Go on." She was not surprised that Wen Tingshan was the first senior in the spiritual circle in the previous life. Wen Tingshan looked at Su Li with a little surprise. Although he felt strange, it was not the time to care about these details. He recalled what happened in these years and continued to tell with a gloomy expression. Although the token of the head of the Wanjian sect was lost, his strength was there. No one objected to my proposal to be the next head of the Wanjian sect. Perhaps my younger brother noticed that I still had a trace of affection for him in my heart, so he did not hesitate to use it to hurt me. When Tingshan smiled slightly, but his expression was bleak. That night, he colluded with outsiders and gathered more than 40 seniors in the first step of the longevity realm to kill me. If I hadn't broken through from the peak of the first step to the second step of the longevity realm at the critical moment, it would have been impossible for me to escape. Surrounded by 40 immortal levels. What kind of terrifying scene was that? In the entire martial arts circle of the Dahan country, there was no one in the longevity realm. Fang Yuan was shocked. Even Su Li's expression changed subtly. What she had seen and heard in her previous life was too low. She had only come into contact with immortal level when she was following the legendary lady. However, she had no idea about the division of immortal level. It was not a good time to ask about it. That night I ran for my life in panic, and I ran for several years. My injuries didn't get better, and instead, they were getting worse. Because of this, I couldn't exert 10% of my strength. This situation lasted for a long time until I met you, Su Li. Although the star source of wood you have mastered is very little, it is more than enough to treat the people in the longevity realm. For the past half a year, you've personally treated my injuries. Coupled with the miraculous elixirs, the injuries on my body have long been healed, and my cultivation has also improved slightly. Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. The star source of wood was the starlight mentioned by Qi Xianqing. It was a power that could only be mastered by the people in the longevity realm. I'm afraid that Wentinghi never dreamed that there would be a warrior of the inborn realm who mastered the holy means of healing in the secular world. When Tingshan sneered, "There are only 6 people in the first step of the longevity realm who chased me. With my current strength, it's easy to kill them. You have been staying in the Leanly building all the time. Even if you fight, you hide your identity. They shouldn't know it. Why do you hide in the spiritual realm?" Hearing this, Su Li's speculation gradually became clear, and she asked directly. When Tingshan shook his head and smiled bitterly, "Although our Wanjian sect specializes in swordsmanship, there are also practitioners who practice unorthodox methods. Wentinghi has a senior in the longevity realm who specializes in deduction. Relying on this person's deduction skill, they can follow me like maggots in a tarsal bone. I can't get rid of them no matter how hard I try. So, after your injury was healed, that person sensed the danger and hid in the spiritual realm with others." Su Li suddenly realized that everything was caused by the peeping sky skill. The sky-peering technique was a unique technique of the cultivators of the longevity realm who practiced the way of deduction. It could be used to predict good fortune and avoid disasters. It could also be used to track anything with the owner's breath. It had a wider range than the poisonous insect technique. For example, Fang Yuan's vital insect, the poisonous insect 1,000 miles tracking, could only cover a distance of 10,000 miles. But the tracking skill of the practitioners in the longevity realm could reach a distance of 100,000 miles or even 1,000,000 miles. The range would gradually expand with the growth of the practitioner's cultivation. Since you have reached the second step of cultivation and recovered, those people should know that their fate has long been doomed. Escaping into the spiritual realm is just deceiving themselves. Su Li curled her lips slightly. She knew very well what the spiritual realm was. Even with the peeping sky skill, she couldn't find any mystery. The practitioner who was proficient in the peeping sky skill must have regarded the spiritual realm as the only way to survive, so he hid in it with others. But he didn't know that the people in the spiritual realm would not care about them at all. After this trip, the matter in the Wanjian sect will be finished. Uncle Shan, I'm afraid you need to go back to the spiritual circle, Su Li said calmly. When Tingshan raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled, "After I settle the chaos in the Wanjian sect, I will bring people back to help you. It won't take too long." With his cultivation, as long as he returned to the sect with the token, he could immediately grasp the general trend. At most, he could integrate the Wanjian sect within a month. "Then I congratulate you in advance." Ho ho, Fang Yuan sat aside and watched them talking happily. He couldn't help but fall into silence. He found that he couldn't get a word in. He knew nothing about the so-called longevity realm, the peeping sky skill and the spiritual realm. Compared with Su Li, his knowledge was too far behind. For a time, a feeling of inferiority suddenly brewed in the bottom of his heart. This inferiority had existed for a long time, but it had been affecting him in a subtle way. At this moment, it was obvious that this inferiority had grown. However, even if he felt inferior, he would never retreat in front of Su Li. He would have his own way to make up for all the gaps. After an hour, the carriage finally stopped in front of a dilapidated temple. Fang Yuan got off the carriage and looked around. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. This place was infinitely close to the city wall of Yunjing City. It was a rare desolate place in Yunjing City. Temple. If he was right, it was a temple of the earth where no one worshipped for a long time. Was the spiritual realm here? Su Li walked slowly out of the carriage and looked solemn. Although she said it casually on the carriage, she didn't dare to be careless. If Fang Yuan observed more carefully, he would find that every grass, every tree, and even the gravel here contained a unique charm. It was otherworldly and did not belong to the world. It was like a small boat anchored at a dock that only had a tiny connection with the land. If this connection was broken, the existence here would immediately be like a small boat on a turbulent river, drifting away involuntarily. Su Li stood silently for a moment and recalled the scene when she met the extraordinary woman here for the first time in the previous life. But just for a moment, she came to her senses. In Fang Yuan's puzzled eyes, She nodded to Wen Tingshan and said, "Let's start." Wen Tingshan's eyes flashed. It seemed that he confirmed something at this moment. Then he did not hesitate to kneel in front of the statue of the Earth God. His height was exactly 99 feet. He patted his chest and forced out a drop of purple-red blood. He shouted, "Blood of the true spirit, open the true spirit." Just at the moment when his voice fell, there was a ripple in the originally calm nothingness, like throwing a stone into the lake. The purple-red blood trembled and the ripple became bigger and bigger. Finally, everything in front of him was disturbed. The nothingness was torn apart like a piece of broken paper. Instead, there was another picture. Feng Yuan stared at the surroundings blankly. At this moment, he was not in a dilapidated temple, but a hall with extremely gorgeous and exquisite decoration. At this moment, there were only 3 of them in the hall. Such a magical scene completely subverted his view of the world. Su Li's reaction was average. The spiritual realm needed to be opened with the blood of the people of the spiritual circle. Although she was not a person of the spiritual circle, she had seen this scene countless times. When Tingshan saw Su Li's reaction and frowned slightly. He could not see whether Su Li was really calm or pretending. At this moment, a graceful voice came. Su Li and the other 2 looked at the same time. They saw a woman in cyan coming slowly. She gave a salute and said with a warm smile, "It turns out that you are the head of the Wanjian sect. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." She seemed to be very respectful, but Feng Yuan still felt the indifference and coldness from her. It seemed that everything that happened in the world had nothing to do with them. They were more like bystanders than living in this world. "Fairy Qinghe, nice to meet you." When Tingshan returned a salute and said in a neither humble nor arrogant manner. He only had 2 impressions of the spiritual realm, mysterious and powerful. But he didn't dare to speak with contempt like Su Li. "I think we can't hide the purpose of our coming from Fairy Qinghe. Please don't interfere in the affairs of the Wanjian sect." Qinghe nodded with a smile and said, "Head, you must be joking. The spiritual realm never interferes in the affairs of the spiritual circle. It only records the rise and fall of the spiritual circle. The spiritual realm will not interfere in the affairs of the Wanjian sect. Please go ahead, Head." Hearing this, Wen Tingshan's face darkened slightly, but he didn't dare to lose his temper. He could only take Su Li and Feng Yuan to look for the people of the Wanjian sect in the huge spiritual realm. But they didn't find anyone except Qinghe, not to mention that they recognized them. Chapter 273. Deacon Qinghe, what do you mean? After the group of people turned around and returned to the original hall, when Tingshan finally asked coldly. He had been to the spiritual realm before. In every country in the secular world and every big sect in the martial arts circle, there would be a spiritual realm stationed. In addition to the head of the realm, there were 6 deacons and many servants with lower status. But now, there was only one deacon in the spiritual realm of Dahan country, Qinghe, and there were no other servants. Was it normal? When Qinghe was questioned, the smile on her face slowly disappeared. Her originally warm tone also quickly became cold. "Pavilion Master One, I don't understand what you're saying. If you want to deal with your family's matters, I've already asked you to do as you please. Could it be that you still expect me to provide you with some help?" When Tingshan looked serious and was about to refute, Su Li suddenly stood out and stopped him. "Uncle Shan, it's useless to say more. There is a tactical matrix here, and we haven't really entered the spiritual realm yet." Tactical matrix? Feng Yuan immediately became nervous. He subconsciously put Su Li behind him and looked around vigilantly. A trace of surprise flashed through Qinghe's eyes, but she didn't panic. She slightly raised the corners of her mouth and chuckled. "I didn't expect this little sister to be an expert. This tactical matrix is nothing in our spiritual realm, but not everyone can detect it." Su Li smiled slightly and ignored Qinghe. She turned to Feng Yuan and said, "Do as I say, and I will teach you to break the tactical matrix." Feng Yuan was stunned and nodded with a little strange. If Su Li wanted to command him to break the tactical matrix, she could transmit the sound. Why did she say it clearly? Wasn't it a slap in the face of Deacon Qinghe? Sure enough, Qing He saw that Su Li not only ignored her but also wanted to break the tactical matrix. Her face immediately became gloomy, and her voice became sharp because of anger. What a boastful little girl! How dare you break the tactical matrix of the spiritual realm? I'd like to see what you can do. Su Li smiled slightly. Deacon Qing, you don't need to understand what I can do. But before I break the tactical matrix, please don't act rashly, so as to avoid some unpleasant misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Qing He looked angry. You are just a silly little girl. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare he threaten the deacon of spiritual realm? I will discipline you for Wentingshan. Before Su Li finished her words, Qing He had already attacked angrily. Su Li squinted her eyes slightly and didn't dodge. Bang! There was an explosion in the air, and even the surrounding scene rippled. Qing He widened her almond-shaped eyes and looked at Wentingshan in disbelief. She screamed, Wentingshan! You? How dare you attack me? This was the spiritual realm, the most mysterious and powerful force in this world. Whether it was the inborn realm or the longevity realm, there was no difference in front of this behemoth. The last person who offended the spiritual realm had already died without leaving any bones. Wentingshan's face was very ugly. Of course, he knew the result of fighting in the spiritual realm. But Su Li didn't dodge just now. It was obvious that she wanted him to fight. Noises. Su Li frowned and looked indifferent. She continued to instruct, Uncle Shan, restrain her first. Wait until I break the tactical matrix. Wentingshan was also forthright. Anyway, he had already started. In for a penny, in for a pound. He directly grabbed Qing He's nape with one hand, making her unable to move. Wentingshan, you are crazy. Your juniors don't know the rules. Don't you know the rules of the spiritual realm? You're digging your own grave. No one can save you. Slap. A bright red palm print appeared on Qing He's face. It was burning. Su Li slowly withdrew her palm and still looked indifferent. She said, If you dare to say more, it will not be as simple as a slap. Shut up. Qing He's eyes were full of fear. She didn't expect that Wentingshan was so bold. With her cultivation of the inborn sixth hurdle, she was no match for Wentingshan. She couldn't even react. What's more, she didn't expect that such a 16 or 17-year-old girl could be so decisive and ruthless. She even dared to slap her. She could see that the girl was clearly a hothead. She didn't know why Wentingshan obeyed her orders. However, after being slapped, she completely calmed down. The hothead was afraid of the unreasonable, and the unreasonable was afraid of the desperate. In Qing He's eyes, Su Li was desperate. She chose to retreat temporarily. When the tactical matrix was broken, she would return to the spiritual realm and all the crises would be resolved. At that time, she would make Su Li beg for death. Qing He thought bitterly. Su Li noticed her gaze but didn't respond at all. She continued to command Fang Yuan to break the tactical matrix. Su Li, are you sure? Wentingshan couldn't help but transmit the sound. Although Su Li had always shown extraordinary maturity and wisdom, he couldn't think of a way to break the spiritual realm rashly. Uncle Shan, don't be impatient. After breaking the tactical matrix, you will know the result. Seeing Su Li's confident look, Wentingshan was a little relieved. He chose to believe her after getting along with her during this time. However, this sentence was a one-sided statement to cover up panic in Qing He's ears. A vicious smile flashed across her face. She was already thinking about how to deal with Su Li after getting out of trouble. 31 steps to the right, draw your sword. 9 steps forward, shatter the stone pillar. Return to the original position. Su Li's voice constantly came to his ears. Fang Yuan's expression remained unchanged and he executed meticulously. In his opinion, the difficulty of breaking this tactical matrix was even less than that of the natural tactical matrix they encountered in the mountains of Dawang village. In less than 10 minutes, the surrounding scene made a sound like porcelain breaking. With the last sword of Fang Yuan, the tactical matrix was broken. After the fluctuation of the tactical matrix passed, the 4 figures appeared in front of an exquisitely decorated hexagonal attic. The plaque, Spiritual Realm, on the attic was shining. The sudden appearance of the three people naturally attracted the attention of people in the attic. When someone saw Qin He being controlled by Wen Tingshan with a pale face, everyone's face suddenly changed. Even the attic itself was faintly shaking. It had not happened for many years that outsiders caught the executive of the spiritual realm. Go and inform the head of the spiritual realm. They have bad intentions. Isn't that the next head of the Wanjian sect? Why does he suddenly attack Lady Qinghe? Something big is going to happen today. When Tingshan looked at the chaos of the spiritual realm because of their appearance calmly, but he couldn't help but frown slightly. Qinghe saw this scene and finally laughed out loud. When Tingshan, if you still have a shred of reason left in you, let go of me now and push all the blame onto this girl. Perhaps if I'm in a good mood, I might even let you live. Otherwise, all of you will die. Wen Tingshan's face was gloomy and his eyes changed. But his hands were always clenched tightly without any relaxation. Qinghe didn't understand the relationship between him and Su Li at all. He owed Su Li his life and promised to work for her for 10 years. Even if it was a dangerous situation, he would not choose to give up Su Li and escape alone. Moreover, he was not completely without confidence in Su Li. As for Fang Yuan, who stood beside Su Li, he was always expressionless. No matter what happened, he would completely stand on Su Li's side and would not waver. Not long after, the other 5 executives stationed here all arrived and stood in a line to confront Su Li and the other 3. Soon after, a middle-aged man in a gray robe with a plain face stepped out of the attic. He slightly cupped his hands to Wen Tingshan and said in a neither humble nor arrogant manner, "Head Wen, I've heard a lot about you. You are also a giant in the spiritual circle. How did our Deacon Qing offend you? Why did you come to the spiritual realm for confrontation?" Seeing the middle-aged man's gentle attitude, Wen Tingshan frowned a little and hesitated. "Your Excellency, are you?" The middle-aged man seemed to understand and nodded with a smile. "I forgot that I am Chu Xiao, the head of the spiritual realm of Dahan country." Head Chu. Before Wen Tingshan spoke, Su Li stepped out and said with a faint smile. This, Chu Xiao frowned slightly and felt uncomfortable. He saw that Su Li was only about 16 years old. She didn't know the etiquette. The discipline of the Wanjian sect was too loose. Su Li smiled calmly and didn't give the middle-aged man a chance to speak. "It doesn't matter who I am. The important thing is that Head Chu, you are incompetent and let the spiritual realm produce such an unruly executive. What should you do?" "What?" Chu Xiao's expression turned cold. He looked at the pitiful Qin He with a questioning look in his eyes. When Qin He met his gaze, she panicked and immediately cried out, "Building Master, save me. I didn't overstep the rules. This girl didn't know the rules at all. She not only let Wen Tingshan catch me but also slapped me. She didn't take the spiritual realm seriously at all." As soon as the words came out, the other 5 executives were immediately furious and spoke one after another. "Head, you can't be careless. Otherwise, you will lose the face of the spiritual realm. How dare you offend the spiritual realm at such a young age? How did your elders teach you? I think it's better to catch Wen Tingshan and others together and deal with them severely. Even if the Wanjian sect holds us responsible, we have something to say." "Be quiet." Chu Xiao's voice was not loud, but it overshadowed everyone. The scene immediately became silent. As the head of the spiritual realm, his ability naturally surpassed all the executives. In the face of Qin He's cry for help, he thought of another unusual detail at the moment. It seemed that this girl was not Wen Tingshan's elder, but Wen Tingshan followed her orders? And, little girl, you mentioned the rules of the spiritual realm. With a faint smile on his face, Chu Xiao fixed his eyes on Su Li's beautiful face. "The rules of the spiritual realm are never spread out. Do you really know what rules we follow?" Hearing this, Su Li couldn't help but chuckle. Her lips moved slightly, and her voice was transmitted to the latter's ears. Chapter 274. "Come on, take Qinghe away." Chu Xiao's expression was no longer gentle, and his decision was even more shocking. The other 5 deacons widened their eyes and felt cold all over. They couldn't help but look at Su Li again. What on earth did the woman say to the head? She could make the head punish Qing He in public regardless of the face of the spiritual realm. Qing He's face was pale and she was completely panicked. She couldn't stop struggling and screaming, "Lord, what did I do wrong? I have served the spiritual realm for 32 years. Even if I don't have any credit, I have worked hard. Could it be that my years of conscientious service are nothing more than a few words of a silly girl? Milord, you've disappointed this concubine too much." The touching words and Qing He's innocent and unwilling look made everyone in the spiritual realm feel a little strange. Today's decision of the head was too unfair. Seeing this, Chu Shao snorted and said clearly, "Bai Ju, find out the relationship between her and Wen Tingyi of the Wanjian sect. If she really violates the rules of the spiritual realm, she will be expelled from the spiritual realm." What? Qing He colluded with outsiders? The old man with gray hair turned pale with fright when he heard this. He was Bai Ju who Chu Shao had mentioned, and he was also the number 1 deacon among the 6 deacons. The doubts in the eyes of the other 4 deacons faded away. They were all surprised and doubtful. Chu Shao dared to say it clearly, so he must have some confidence. When Qing He heard this, she knew clearly what would happen to her. She trembled all over and collapsed on the ground like a puddle of mud. She took risks for temporary interests and thought that she would never be discovered. Now Chu Shao was suspicious, and she couldn't stand the investigation at all. Chu Shao saw Qing He's reaction, and the last hesitation in his eyes disappeared. He said with an ugly face, "I wanted to save you some face. Since you don't want it, don't blame me for being ruthless and taking her away." Bai Ju immediately took the order and walked to Wen Tingshan. Wen Tingshan glanced at Su Li and saw her nod. Then he let go of his hand and let Bai Ju take her into the spiritual realm. A conflict disappeared. After a while, Su Li and the other 2 were invited to the room. Wen Tingshan looked around and knew that the standard of this guest room was not simple. He became more and more curious about what Su Li said to Chu Shao. He didn't think it was only because of Qinghe that Chu Zhao's attitude changed so much. When Tingshan didn't have time to think about it, Chu Shao came over with a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Miss, this is indeed the problem of the spiritual realm. As an apology, I will capture the people from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion and hand them over to Pavilion Master Wen. In addition, the spiritual realm will also give you other compensation, which can be regarded as a comfort for you." "How long has it been? Master Chu has already found out the truth?" When Tingshan was surprised. It was only less than 10 minutes. Even if he wanted to make Qinghe confess, it would not be so easy. Although when Tingshan interrupted, Chu Lu didn't show any anger on her face. She explained with a smile, "Don't be surprised, Pavilion Master Wen. The spiritual realm records the rise and fall of the spiritual circle and even this world. The intelligence system is extremely thorough. Now, except for the mistake of Deacon Qinghe, it is not because of the problem of intelligence, but because no one checked it. Now that Deacon Qinghe is pointed out by this miss, it is easy for the spiritual realm to check it." When Tingshan nodded slightly and understood, but he was shocked in his heart. In this way, nothing in the world could be hidden from the eyes and ears of the spiritual realm. If the spiritual realm had been ambitious and never participated in the disputes of the outside world, the overlord of the spiritual circle would not have been the turn of those forces. It seems that Pavilion Master Wen is satisfied with my handling. In this case, Chu Shao turned his eyes to Su Li and changed the topic. "Miss, can I have a word with you?" Su Li's eyes flashed and she nodded. "That's what I mean. Uncle Shan, Feng Yuan, I will be back soon. You wait here for a moment." "Miss, don't worry. During this time, the spiritual realm will entertain you well," Chu Shao said considerately, and there seemed to be some eagerness in his words. Although when Tingshan and Feng Yuan had a lot of doubts in their hearts, they also knew that it was not the time to ask, so they immediately nodded and agreed. A moment later, on the top floor of the spiritual realm, Su Li calmly followed Chu Shao in. If Feng Yuan was qualified to come here, he would find that the layout here was similar to that of the attic on the top floor of the Linli building. The only difference was that the cost of the furniture here was more than 10 million times more expensive than that of the attic of the Linli building. When they met alone, Chu Xiao finally showed his true feelings. He didn't look at Su Li as an elder looked at a junior, but as an equal. May I ask which branch of the spiritual realm you are? Why did you leave your post and come to our Dahan country as a guest? After a moment of silence, Chu Xiao probed cautiously. Just now, Su Li didn't say much in sound transmission, just 2 words. Jing Xian. Only people above the level of the head of the spiritual realm were qualified to know this name. Su Li smiled as if she returned to her own home. She walked to the table and sat down calmly. Head Chu, you don't need to test me. I'm not a head of any spiritual realm, let alone a member of the spiritual realm. Chu Xiao's expression changed immediately. How could the name of the great master be leaked? Was there a traitor among the heads of the spiritual realm? But at this moment, Su Li spoke again. Head Chu, you don't need to guess blindly. I'm not an enemy of the spiritual realm. I just had a relationship with that person a long time ago. If it's convenient, please transmit the sound in silence to her and tell her that an old friend invited me. I think she should understand. Chu Xiao was shocked. An old friend? The great master was so ancient and had lived for so many years. But today, a 16-year-old girl said that she was an old friend of the great master? He immediately thought of some legendary existences. It was said that even if those existences died, they could escape the restraint of the natural law and get a glimpse of the mystery of heaven and reincarnate with memory. Was it possible that the person standing in front of him was a reincarnated supreme master? Thinking of this, Chu Xiao's heart beat like a drum and his expression became extremely respectful. He bent down and whispered, "What you said, I dare not disobey. But, may I have the honor to know your name, so that I can have proof when I report?" Su Li, Su as in Gusu and Li as in Linli. Su Li responded a little weirdly. She just suspected that Jing Xian knew her previous life and present life, but she didn't know how many bizarre things Chu Xiao had imagined. Jing Xian. It was a strange name. It was the name that she told herself when she followed that amazing woman in her previous life. Later, she left Jing Xian and traveled in the martial world. She didn't know how important this name was until she got the chance to do so. The spiritual realm was a terrifying force beyond the mortal world, and Jing Xian was its master. People called Great Lord of True Spirit. In the previous life, she was in a miserable situation. When she met Jing Xian, she had already fallen into the evil circle and was hated by everyone. The so-called righteous people all wanted to kill her. At that time, Jing Xian came forward to protect her and allowed her to practice with her for 3 years. Those 3 years greatly enriched her knowledge. Without those 3 years, she was afraid that she would have died early. However, that encounter also left her with many questions. She couldn't figure out why an ordinary girl like her, who had only stepped onto the path of cultivation by chance, had even gone astray. She didn't have the slightest bit of difference, so why exactly was she able to enter the eyes of the Holy Lord? Moreover, the evaluation of the Great Lord of True Spirit in the spiritual circle was positive, while she, an evil witch, was even more unreasonable. After her rebirth, she had always suppressed all kinds of doubts in her heart. Until the so-called broken ring appeared, all kinds of incredible things made her have a moment of enlightenment. Perhaps Jing Xian had already seen her future. Perhaps there were some things she wanted to know from Jing Xian. On the one hand, she came to the spiritual realm to denounce the Wanjian sect, but more for the purpose in her heart. The matter of Wentingyi was just solved by the way. It was one of the iron rules of the spiritual realm not to have cause and effect with the spiritual circle. If Qing He dared to use her power for personal gain, she would end up worse than she imagined. She vaguely remembered that in the previous life, there was a greedy head of a branch of the spiritual realm and became a local tyrant. Later, he was beheaded by Jing Xian in public. His head was hung in the Zong Pavilion of the spiritual realm for 7 days and 7 nights, which made people tremble. However, many years after that incident, she changed many futures in this life. After Qing He was caught, it was still unknown whether there would be such a local tyrant again. After thinking for a moment, the chaotic thoughts faded in her mind. Su Li came back to herself and saw Chu Xiao standing aside and waiting quietly. She couldn't help but feel a little ridiculous, but she didn't explain anything and walked out of the attic. Chu Xiao immediately followed her and whispered in Su Li's ear, "Senior, you have thought for an hour. I have handed the traitor of the Wanjian sect to Wen Tingshan to deal with. If you need..." Before Chu Xiao finished his words, Su Li's eyes became cold and she asserted, "The spiritual realm is not contaminated with cause and effect. If you dare to violate it, no one can save you." Chu Xiao suddenly woke up and cold sweat immediately flowed down. "Senior, you are right. I am confused." Su Li shook her head and was about to leave. Before she left, she didn't forget to say, "If you have no other important things, it is better to let your great lord know about my affairs as soon as possible. I will go to the Zong Pavilion today." Chu Xiao repeatedly promised and sent Su Li to the door. Then he left in a hurry, which made other deacons' eyes wide open. They secretly guessed what noble identity Su Li had and even wanted to explore it. However, this idea was interrupted by Chu Xiao's warning before it was implemented. No one dared to think about it anymore. When the three returned to the Linli building, it had been half a day. Wen Tingshan was full of bloody smell. Obviously, he had just killed someone. He didn't talk too much with Su Li and left directly. He needed to go back to the Wanjian sect to deal with the funeral affairs. With the deterrence of the spiritual realm and the token of the head, it was easy for him to succeed as the head. Chapter 275. Because of the marriage, Su Li failed to deal with the intelligence gathered from all directions for 2 days. She stayed in the attic until the evening. Then she left without stopping. Chu Qingning saw this scene and couldn't help but sigh. Su Li didn't seem to change much before and after the marriage, but he couldn't tell what was different. "Why are you sighing?" A figure suddenly appeared behind him. Chu Qingning was so scared that he almost jumped up. When he saw Luo Yichen, he immediately said angrily, "Can't you make a sound when you walk? You will be scared to death." "I haven't seen a warrior of the inborn realm be scared to death. You might as well broaden my horizons." Luo Yichen smiled. In the Linli building, Chu Qingning had the best relationship with him except Mei Ruhan. Otherwise, he wouldn't even tell a cold joke according to his temper. "Well, your temper? I don't want to talk to you. Fang Yuan wants to talk to us. He is in the addendum now. Let's go." Chu Qingning suddenly understood. No wonder Luo Yichen, who was obsessed with martial arts, had time to talk to him. It turned out that he wanted to talk to him. But Su Li just left. What could Fang Yuan have to talk to him? With doubts, Chu Qingning followed Luo Yichen to the underground addendum. All the acquaintances were sitting at the table. Compared with the secret discussion in the morning, only Wen Tingshan and Su Li were absent. "Everyone is here." Seeing Chu Qingning and Fang Yuan arrive, Yin Xuetong's eyes flashed. "Brother Fang, what do you want to talk to us about?" Fang Yuan glanced at everyone and said softly, "I just have a little doubt and need to verify. How many Wudao stones did Su Li give you?" As he said, he spread out his palm, and there were 9 Wudao stones on it. Hiss! Chu Qingning took a breath and screamed, "I thought Su Li had given me enough Wudao stones. You have one more than me. I have 8. Fang Mu met his eldest brother's eyes and immediately said obediently, "I also have 8. A light flashed in Luo Yichen's eyes. He seemed to notice the strangeness and said softly, 9. Yin Xuetong frowned, "I also have 8. Su Li asked me to practice hard and break through the inborn realm as soon as possible." Mei Ruhan and Fang Ling looked at each other and took out 4 martial arts stones each. Their cultivation time was too short, so no matter how many martial arts stones they had, it was useless. Seeing the number of Wudao stones in everyone's hands, Fang Yuan's expression sank completely. Luo Yichen thought for a while and murmured, "Fang Yuan, I remember you said that Su Li disguised as Mr. Li to meet Ling Li and asked for 50 Wudao stones. Now, the martial arts stones are all here." Yin Xuetong's eyes flashed with shock and puzzlement. Su Li didn't even keep one for herself. Doesn't she need to practice? In an instant, a heavy feeling lingered in everyone's heart. Before Su Li was about to die, she made arrangements for her funeral. Now she inexplicably survived and did such a strange thing. People couldn't help but associate the two with each other. Shua. Fang Yuan was silent. He grabbed the Wudao stones and stood up suddenly. Then he turned around and left. Chu Qingning was shocked. Fang Yuan, don't be impulsive. What are you going to do? Fang Yuan stopped and looked back at Chu Qingning coldly. Chu Qingning felt cold all over. Then he said softly, practice. His strength couldn't help her. Only by mastering enough cultivation as soon as possible could he be qualified to reverse the situation. He didn't want to experience the powerlessness of the last time again. Cultivation couldn't be done behind closed doors. He needed to improve his cultivation in a more crazy way. Hey, wait for me. Chu Qingning was worried and hurriedly chased after him. After a long time, he came back alone and was a little lost. Qingning, Yin Xuetong greeted him with concern. Chu Qingning smiled reluctantly and said, I'm fine. Fang Yuan said that he went to Uncle Shan's place to practice and strive to break through his cultivation as soon as possible. I just think whether we should do something. We can't let Su Li handle everything alone, can we? Yin Xuetong was stunned, and then a touch of relief appeared in her eyes. They were all young, less than 20 years old. In ordinary families, they were still ignorant children. Chu Qingning was carefree and cynical. If there was no accident, the man in her eyes might need a few years or even a decade to understand what responsibility was. However, under the stimulation of Su Li and Fang Yuan, he was maturing at a very fast speed. Qingning, do what you want to do. I will support you wholeheartedly and won't hold you back. Yin Xuetong's gentle voice came. Chu Qingning was stunned and immediately grinned. Wait for me to call Luo Yichen. I can't let you stay in the room alone. Yin Xuetong blushed slightly and couldn't help but spit. Don't be serious. Hurry up. Now there is nothing to do in the Linli building, and Uncle Shan will bring people back soon. You can leave at ease. Okay. Chu Qingning solemnly responded, and his eyes flashed with firmness. Su Li kept saying that it was a fair deal. But now Su Li's unilateral contribution couldn't be completely covered by a deal. No matter how much time she had left, they would try their best to break through their own realms and do their best to help her. Only in this way could they have no regrets in their hearts. In the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, Ling Qinglan came back from the Supreme Judiciary and was discussing recent important things with Ling Li. His sister Yi Shui came back, which made him happy recently. Even if the cases of the Supreme Judiciary and the Tianya House were piled up and he was extremely tired every day, he was not unhappy at all. Recently, the Nanjiang country and the Lianshi cult fought fiercely, and even the border suffered. The army is ready to take action. I'm afraid that the second brother will go to battle again. Ling Qinglan analyzed. Ling Li frowned slightly. The war of the Nanjiang country had subsided. However, at the auction at the end of the year, he plotted to kill Wei Yuran and successfully framed the Lianshi cult. But it also caused the second brother to return to the battlefield. The situation on the battlefield changed rapidly. Over the years, he couldn't arrive in time every time to help Ling Ping win the battle. Now the relationship between him and the royal family was getting more and more tense. In this case, how could he not worry about Ling Ping going to battle again? But at this moment, the mechanism on the table suddenly turned on its own, and a hole appeared on the ground. Su Li's voice slowly emerged from the ground. Ling Qinglan was slightly shocked, and then he was relieved. Whether Su Li wanted to marry Ling Li or not, she was indeed the wife of the hierarch of the Yinma cult. Of course, she was qualified to use the tunnel of the headquarters. Seeing that Ling Qinglan was also there, Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. I'll leave now. No. Ling Li interrupted. He didn't ask where Su Li went today. He stared at Su Li for a moment and said slowly, if I am in the study and you are in the wing room, how will my mother and others think of it? Ling Qinglan, who was watching, couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He sighed a little. Sure enough, Su Li was forced to marry into the Ling family. She and Ling Li were so close at the beginning. Who ever thought that their relationship was so estranged? Since Hierarch Ling is not afraid that the information of your cult will be leaked, Su Li said coldly. She walked to the rattan chair next to the bookshelf and sat down. She picked up an ancient book and read it quietly. She knew that it was nothing more than an excuse for Ling Li to let her stay with him. But she couldn't refute this excuse. After all, no one knew whether Chiu Meng was observing her. Ling Li saw that Su Li promised to stay, but she even sat with her back to him. Helplessness flashed in his eyes. This kind of marriage also made Su Li hate him completely. Her words and deeds made him feel very uncomfortable. But even so, he still wanted Su Li to stay with him. It was painful and happy. Ling Qinglan pursed his lips and continued to talk about other information. The relationship between Su Li and Ling Li was complicated. He didn't want to get involved. It was getting dark. Ling Mo came forward to light the oil lamp, and then continued to guard the door. Occasionally, he curiously stretched out his head to see what Su Li was reading. Su Li didn't mean to hide and let Ling Mo peep. "Ling Mo, you don't need to guard here. Go to practice first." Suddenly, Ling Li's voice came. Ling Mo was slightly stunned. It was almost time for dinner, and Ling Qinglan was not here. Madam might come to check in person. Was the master confused to let him practice at this time? There was a clear sound of turning pages. Ling Mo suddenly understood. Then he felt strange and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just because Su Li asked him to peep at the books, the master was jealous? How could he be jealous? The relationship between him and Su Li was obviously terrible. In this case, the master could be so stingy. It was rare in the world. "Ling Mo." When Ling Li spoke again with a black face, Su Li suddenly closed the book and stood up. She picked up the teapot on the stove and made a cup of tea. Then she carefully brought it to Ling Li, who was full of astonishment. Her face became as gentle as water in an instant. A touch of bright red appeared on her face. She whispered, "Honey, please have some tea." Then she helped Su Li to clean up the files. In the blink of an eye, the files on the table were cleared. Ling Li was immediately stunned and couldn't understand. At the moment when Su Li finished cleaning up, Ling Mo's expression changed slightly. He immediately opened the door and went out. Then Ling Li heard the voice, "Madam." Chiu Meng came. He should have thought of it. But he was shocked by Su Li's action and was distracted for a while. However, because of the tactical matrix of the East Courtyard, ordinary inborn spiritual awareness could not penetrate it. Even Ling Mo, who specially spent a lot of effort to practice the psychic awareness, just noticed the arrival of Chiu Meng. How did Su Li know the whereabouts of his mother in advance? Was it possible that Su Li's psychic awareness was stronger than Ling Mo's? Just when Ling Li was in doubt, Chiu Meng had already pushed the door open and came in. She saw Su Li standing quietly beside her son and glimpsed the fragrant tea. Her smile on her face immediately became wider. Originally, she was worried that Su Li pretended to be virtuous in front of her. After all, with her son's ability, if he was really arrogant in front of her daughter-in-law, it would be hard for Su Li not to dislike him. Fortunately, all her worries were superfluous. Su Li was much more sensible than she thought. Chapter 276. At dinner, Ms. Gu might be tired, so she didn't show up. After Ling Li had dinner with Su Li and his mother, Chiu Meng handed an invitation to Ling Li and said carefully, "Son, I know that you have turned over a new leaf for Li and no longer go out to make trouble. But it's not a good idea to stay at home. I have an invitation here. Take Li to the banquet. Don't let her be wronged. Do you understand?" Ling Li nodded helplessly and listened to his mother's advice casually. He opened the invitation and glanced at it. Suddenly he was shocked. Chiu Meng noticed that something was wrong and couldn't help but ask, "Son, what's wrong with the invitation?" No. Ling Li responded quickly and said with a smile, "But mother, you know that I seem to have a relationship with the host of the banquet?" Then he raised the invitation in his hand. Su Li vaguely saw the words, "Dong Fongyun," flashed on it, and an unknown meaning flashed on her face. Hearing that, Chiu Meng's face immediately darkened. She glanced at Su Li quietly and saw that Su Li was confused. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief and scolded in a low voice, "You have a family now. You can't do the ridiculous thing in the past again. Fortunately, the fourth princess is also married. She won't care about the past. You can take Su Li to the banquet." "Don't care about the past?" Ling Li smiled bitterly. He didn't believe it, but he didn't refuse. He agreed with a bitter face. Seeing that her son nodded, Chiu Meng left with satisfaction. She thought that she could finally hold her head high in front of those gossipy women. As for how to deal with the banquet tomorrow, it would be solved by the juniors themselves. The bowls and chopsticks were cleaned up by the servants. Ling Li took the invitation and returned to the east courtyard with Su Li. He looked calm and a hint of wisdom flashed in his eyes. The host of the banquet was the fourth princess, Dong Fangyin. Su Li gently picked up the invitation that Ling Li put on the table. She opened it and said in a quiet and sweet voice, "The fourth princess invites all the couples in Yunjing City who have been married for less than a year. Although the reason is sufficient, the time is coincidentally the second day after our marriage." Speaking of this, Su Li looked slightly cold and smiled in a low voice. Dong Fang Xiao is really suspicious. Ling Li nodded in agreement. The so-called purpose of the banquet was not as simple as his mother thought. It was obviously a test arranged by Dong Fang Xiao. "By the way, what happened between you and Dong Fangyun?" After a moment of silence in the room, Su Li suddenly asked. Ling Li held his breath, and a trace of embarrassment flashed on his face. He didn't say a word for a long time. Seeing this, Su Li's expression didn't change at all. She just shook her head and sneered, "Well, I'm not interested in your romantic history. Don't make any mistakes tomorrow." Then, Su Li stepped out of the study and quickly disappeared into the night. Ling Li stood at the table and looked out of the window at the dark night. After a long time, he took a breath and came back to himself. His eyes were clear again. Turning the wheelchair to the wing room, Ling Li didn't see Su Li. He couldn't help but wonder where Su Li could go at this time. At this time, Mammy Li passed by the room with a bucket of water. Seeing that the master seemed to be looking for something, she couldn't help but say, "Master, are you looking for Madam? Madam is taking a bath in the back hall. If you go there now, you can catch up." "Catch up with what?" Ling Li was stunned. Seeing Mammy Li's meaningful smile, his face immediately turned red, and his face was so hot that it could almost make a sesame seed cake. "Ha!" Mammy Li couldn't help laughing. She quickly left with the bucket of water. The master was still too thin-skinned. It was not a big deal. Naturally, Ling Li couldn't go to the back hall. Otherwise, he could foresee that he would probably be kicked out by Su Li. It was not easy to maintain the current situation. He didn't want his image in Su Li's heart to continue to deteriorate. After going to the bathhouse on the other side to take a rough bath, Ling Li returned to the wing room and waited for a long time. Su Li came back slowly. Before he saw her, a wisp of fragrance had floated into his nose. The delicate and beautiful face showed a perfect outline in the moonlight. The white gauze dress was blown by the night wind, and the exposed white skin was still steaming. She was like a fairy from the ninth heaven, unstained by the secular world. It seemed that she would float away in the next moment. Such a smart and beautiful woman was his wife now. Ling Li thought of this, and he was fascinated for a moment. Suddenly, thwoosh! A white shadow flashed in front of Ling Li's eyes very quickly, and closed the wooden doors on both sides of the inner room. Then he heard a clear sound of the door bolt. Ling Li woke up and was instantly dumbfounded. Su Li locked the door. "Darling, no one will make trouble in the bridal chamber today. In the future, you can only have a rest in the guest room. Don't worry, it won't be too hard for a long time. When the crisis is over, you can divorce me." Su Li's voice came from the door. It seemed that she felt it was not very moral. Her tone was very soft, but Ling Li felt that there was a hint of schadenfreude in her voice. What a devil! Ling Li was angry. He was also a man, and facing his beloved woman, how could he have no reaction? But it was the most painful thing that he could see her but couldn't touch her. Nothing happened all night, and it was dawn in the blink of an eye. Squeak! The door made a light sound, and Su Li came out of the inner room. She was dressed neatly, with a ruddy face and full of spirit. It seemed that she had a good sleep. The sound woke up Ling Li, who tossed and turned for nearly a night and slept in his clothes in the morning. He fell off the rattan chair carelessly. Hiss! Ling Li took a light breath and looked at Su Li's faint smile. His face darkened. He had reached the inborn realm, and he wouldn't feel tired even if he didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. But last night was too torturous, and the energy consumed was much more than that of 3 days and 3 nights. So, he felt a little tired now. At this moment, Mammy Lee pushed the door and came in with things to wash. Seeing that they had gotten up early in the morning and seemed to be quarreling, she didn't say much. She just glanced at the messy bed with a slight meaning, and then turned to go out with a snicker. The maids in the wing room of the east courtyard were all arranged by Chiu Meng. In order not to expose Ling Li's action, Su Li had ordered servants to wash in the morning, and Mammy Li, who was an insider, was responsible for it. It saved a lot of trouble. Washing and tying up their hair ended in an awkward and harmonious weird atmosphere. After breakfast, they got on the carriage and left. Apparently, they only took Ling Mo and Yun Yi as guards. After the carriage with the mark of the Ling family passed through 2 streets, it drove into the controlled street that only the royal family was qualified to walk. It was unimpeded all the way, and finally stopped in a large royal courtyard. "Master, madam, here we are," Ling Mo, who was driving the carriage, said. At the same time, Yun Yi opened the curtain, set up the skateboard, and waited for Su Li and Ling Li to get off the horse. Su Li pushed the wheelchair out of the carriage. Looking ahead, there was a high wall with red walls and green tiles. On the tall and spacious gate, there was a plaque with 3 flamboyant characters hanging. Lingfeng House. She looked relaxed, but there was a deep caution in her eyes. This was an important place of the royal family, and it was only 1 step away from the imperial palace. If her and Ling Li's real identity was exposed here, it would be hard to escape. In the early years, this was the residence of Dong Fongyun. Later, Dong Fongyun married a husband, and this place was expanded again. So, it has today's scale. The area of the courtyard for the banquet can accommodate hundreds of people at the same time. Ling Li transmitted the sound in silence in a low tone. Here, they couldn't allow any carelessness. Every step must be carefully analyzed. This trip could be regarded as dangerous. No one could predict whether Dongfang Xiao would suddenly attack them. Chiu Meng, who was simple, might not think of this. Otherwise, she would definitely not let Ling Li and Ling Li take risks even if she fell out with those noble madams. At this moment, a group of maids and eunuchs came out of the gatehouse. They saluted to Ling Li and Su Li and said, "Greetings, Your Highness." "Greetings, Your Highness." Ling Li was a little proud and shouted, "Madam, what are you looking at? It's almost time. Let's go in." Su Li's eyes flashed slightly. It seemed that she just came to herself. She blushed and said embarrassedly, "It's the first time for me to come to the royal courtyard. I make a fool of myself." "Hey, even if you make a fool of yourself, you are still very beautiful. Beauty is delicious." Su Li blushed again. She quickly pushed Ling Li into the courtyard. The conversation was heard by the maids. Although they didn't dare to show anything on their faces, they secretly despised them. Even though they were poor in literature, they still knew beauty is delicious. How could the 3rd child of the Ling family mispronounce it? The most talented girl in Yunjing City should marry such a vulgar playboy. It was a reckless waste. They didn't know what the emperor was thinking. The design of the Lingfeng house was obviously done by a master. The scenery of every step could be called a picture. It was just beautiful but not arrogant. Su Li could see that the princess, whom she had never met, was not scheming and not difficult to deal with. After pushing the wheelchair through the gravel path, the 2 of them suddenly saw the light. They also heard the lively conversation. At this moment, there were no less than 30 pairs of beauties and talents in the courtyard. Many people also noticed the arrival of Su Li and Ling Li. Seeing the couple, famous in the capital, in front of them, everyone had different reactions. But they all whispered at the same time. "She is Princess Li. She deserves her reputation. Her eyebrows, eyes and red lips are just perfect. Her skin is as clear as cream. She deserves the title of the first beauty in Yunjing City. You can say this to me. Don't tell your wife. Otherwise, you can't blame me for the trouble in the backyard. Ha, it's a pity that such a fairy-like woman should marry a playboy." "Playboy? He is clearly a good-for-nothing. It's flattering to call him a playboy." Ling Li's eyebrows twitched. With his hearing, he naturally heard every word. But he had to pretend that he didn't hear it. It was really aggrieved. Chapter 277. Su Li. The voice was very familiar. Su Li turned her head when she heard the voice. When she saw the beautiful figure who was walking in a hurry, she was surprised. Gong Min, you are here too? When she came to the Qinghe province at the beginning of the year, thanks to the help of Gong Xiangjuan, her plan could be carried out. After Wu Yun died, Gong Min and Gong Xiangjuan were no longer in danger. After she came to Yunjing, she didn't pay attention to the Gong family. Unexpectedly, Gong Min had already come to Yunjing and got married. While thinking, Gong Min had walked to Su Li. She couldn't help the excitement of seeing an old friend in her eyes. If Su Li didn't stand up for her, she and her grandma would suffer. She couldn't repay her kindness in this life. Su Li, after my grandma and I came to Yunjing, the Wu family suddenly retreated. My grandma had high prestige and regained control of the Gong family. Unfortunately, I was not qualified to find you because of the level of my family. After my grandma knew your identity, she forbade me to contact you until today. Gong Min spoke quickly, and her words naturally revealed her sincerity. It's great to see you. Su Li smiled slightly. She could see that Gong Min was sincere and could understand Gong Xiangjuan. The Gong family had many things to do and couldn't withstand the wind and waves. What's more, the whirlpool she fell into now was not as simple as the wind and waves. It's a pleasure to see my old friend in a strange place. At this moment, a handsome young man came and stood beside Gong Min. He looked at Su Li with amazement and envy, but there was no covetousness in his eyes. Min, I didn't expect that you know Princess Li. Why don't you introduce her to me? As soon as these words came out, Gong Min was slightly startled, but the face of someone sitting in the wheelchair had already completely darkened. Princess Li? Not Madam Ling? Gong Min looked a little embarrassed and said reluctantly, Child Ling, Li, let me introduce you. This is my husband. The young man nodded slightly and said, I'm Zhao Xiu. Nice to meet Princess Li and Child Ling. I have heard that Princess Li is talented and beautiful. Although I don't know how talented you are, I am really impressed by your appearance. The son of the Zhao family? Ling Li's eyes were burning with anger. He said in a low voice, You are just the son of the assistant minister. Who gave you the courage to be on an equal footing with me? Zhao Xiyuan's expression changed slightly, but he didn't show any fear. Instead, he said coldly, Min, take Su Li to the table first. I want to have a good chat with Third Master Ling. Gong Min's eyes were full of worry. She glanced at Su Li and finally sighed, Su Li, I'm really sorry. It's fine. Su Li shook her head slightly and took a deep look at Ling Li. Then she followed Gong Min and left. There were only 2 people left in the field. Zhao Xiyuan put one hand behind his back and straightened up. The anger in his eyes was even more intense than that of Ling Li. He said, Ling Li, a wise man doesn't speak in riddles. It has been spread in the circle that you asked the emperor to grant a marriage and married Princess Li by extraordinary means. You are not a man. Ling Li raised his eyebrows and leaned on the wheelchair. He stared at Zhao Xiyuan's clear eyes. After a while, he suddenly grinned and said, That's what I did. You are just the son of an assistant minister. What can you do? Zhao Xiyuan didn't expect that Ling Li admitted it directly and was so arrogant. He couldn't help but be very angry. He scolded with a livid face, Ling Li, you are really a bastard. It's not up to you to decide whether I am a bastard or not. Ling Li picked his ears and said, You should be glad that you married a good wife. Otherwise, the Zhao family... The threat in Ling Li's words couldn't be more obvious. Even if Zhao Xiyuan was magnanimous and full of justice and wanted to avenge Su Li, he had to be scrupulous at this moment. In grievance, he suddenly thought of something. His eyes brightened and he sneered, Third Master Ling is really as lawless as the rumor says. Today I finally see it. However, I can't do anything to you, but it doesn't mean that everyone can. Let's wait and see. The conversation was deliberately led by Ling Li to end on a bad note. After Zhao Xiyuan left, there was no one around Ling Li except Ling Imo. He looked around and didn't see Su Li. A touch of contemplation flashed in his eyes. Zhao Xiyuan was a real man, but it was a pity that he was used by someone. At present, the situation of the Wu family and the Ma family was very delicate. Ma Jintian and Wu Jin hadn't married yet. Someone wanted to deal with him here? Who could it be, master? The banquet is about to begin. Madam has gone to the hall. Ling Mo whispered in his ear. Ling Li immediately came to himself and waved his hand. Let's go in. At this moment, on the other side of the courtyard, Zhao Xiyuan stood in front of a handsome young man in a golden robe. He said bitterly, Your Highness, Ling Li is really as bad as the rumor says. He is arrogant and domineering. He not only directly admitted those despicable things, but also threatened me. Does he really think that no one in the Dahan country can deal with him? The eyes of the young man in a golden robe flickered, and he looked calm. When he heard what Zhao Xiyuan said, he showed a friendly smile and said, Xiyuan, I know that you hate evil and dislike playboys like Ling Li. But after all, he is a member of the Ling family. As long as he doesn't make big mistakes, not to mention me, even my father can't deal with him easily. Don't worry. If there is a chance in the future, I won't let this cancer act recklessly in Yunjing. When Zhao Xiyuan heard the words, he was relieved and said excitedly, Your Highness is wise. I believe that day will not be too far away. Ho ho, the young man in a golden robe chuckled and said, The situation is not clear. It's better to say less. Xiyuan, you are the person I value. You have unique views on literary and military strategies as well as governing the country and the people. No matter who will be the winner in the end, I hope that you can really use your views on the people. Hearing the sincere words of the young man in a golden robe, Zhao Xiyuan was excited and his eyes became red. He said excitedly, It is the right way for you to hold the ceremony in the Dahan country. I believe that your majesty will definitely make the best choice. The young man in a golden robe chuckled and didn't say yes or no. He changed the topic and said, Well, you go to the banquet first. Don't let your sister-in-law wait for a long time. I will come later. Then I'm leaving. Zhao Xiyuan came with a livid face, but he was happy when he left. The grievance brought by Ling Li had been resolved by the young man in a golden robe. How could a playboy compare with the future princess? If your highness could really ascend the throne, Ling Li would not be as comfortable as now. Watching Zhao Xiyuan leave, the smile on the face of the young man in a golden robe faded quickly and turned into deep doubt. Didn't he know that Ling Li begged the emperor to get married? He was the only prince who could move outside now. This person was the fifth prince, Dongfang Yang, the only one who benefited from the auction at the end of the year. Ling Li actually admitted it directly. Is he too lazy to explain or something else? Why does father ask us to test Ling Li this time? What is his intention? All kinds of thoughts flashed through Dongfang Yang's mind. He really couldn't figure out why the emperor suddenly gave him such a strange order. However, this was a good opportunity for him to make a performance. The fourth sister suddenly held a banquet. She probably received the emperor's order. The eighth sister also came. Is it? Dongfang Yang's eyes flashed. Nowadays, among the descendants of the royal family, other princes were not a big threat to him. Even the first prince was under house arrest in the palace by the emperor. The first sister married a small country, the second sister disappeared for many years, and the eighth sister was still young. The only threat was the fourth sister. Although the emperor would definitely consider the princes first when passing the throne, he couldn't fail miserably. Before the emperor established the throne, he must do his best. Su Li and Gong Min accompanied each other to the banquet, which immediately attracted the attention of many men and women. Su Li's appearance was not a secret in Yunjing City. During the months when she taught in the affiliated school of the National Academy, someone painted her in private, hoping to copy the perfect appearance of Su Li in the painting. In the end, of course, it failed. But the person who painted the painting had some skills and drew some charm. As soon as the painting came out, people scrambled for it. Finally, it was bought by a mysterious person. Su Li in the painting was naturally remembered by many people. Although the banquet of the fourth princess lacked many rules, the distance of the seats still represented the status. Su Li was the daughter of the prince. Now, with the identity of Jun Wang Fei, The seat was naturally in the front. Gong Min was not qualified to sit here, so she had to separate from Su Li for the time being. As soon as Su Li sat down, someone wanted to come over and chat with her. However, Ling Li appeared in time with a smile on his face. He immediately extinguished all the thoughts. Seeing this, Ling Li didn't feel ashamed at all. Instead, he laughed and said, "My wife, although my name is not very good, isn't it to save trouble? Otherwise, these great talents will definitely surround and disturb you shamelessly." Ling Li didn't mean to lower his voice at all. Many childs at the banquet heard it clearly. For a moment, their faces were as black as the bottom of a pot. They were angry but didn't dare to say anything. But they all looked at Su Li at the same time. They wanted to see how the famous beauty in Yunjing would deal with it. With a faint smile on her face, Su Li nodded calmly and said, "You are right, my husband." As soon as Su Li said that, many people were dumbfounded. When a lady from a famous family saw this scene, she was a little less jealous. She smiled sarcastically and said, "Husband, didn't you say that Princess Li is pure and will certainly not succumb to the power of the Ling family? Why do I seem to follow your husband's lead?" Many people opened their mouths and didn't know how to refute. Su Li was indeed the goddess in the hearts of many talents in Yunjing City. But today, their goddess's performance really disappointed them. "Humph! You are a group of ordinary people who only look at the surface. What do you know? Princess Li doesn't care about Ling Li at all. She can be calm in front of such a playboy like Ling Li. Even we can't do that," Zhao Xiyuan said coldly. Many people immediately agreed with him. The lady who spoke rudely just now was about to refute. Suddenly, someone saw that Su Li turned her head and looked at Zhao Xiyuan. Although her expression was indifferent and didn't show much emotion, it didn't prevent them from interpreting it as gratitude. Princess Li looks at him. Zhao Xiyuan is right. He deserves to be the first in the Faculty of Arts last year. Everyone was amazed. The lady had to swallow her words. She was so angry that she secretly stamped her feet. She looked at Su Li with more and more disgust. Chapter 278. Everyone looked along the footsteps and saw a beautiful woman in a palace dress and a young man in a golden robe. They were surrounded by more than a dozen people. The man in a golden robe was Dong Fangyang, whom Zhao Xiyuan met before, and the woman in a palace dress was the hostess of this banquet, fourth Princess Dong Fangyun. For a time, many juniors of lower status immediately stood up and saluted. "Greetings, fourth Princess and His Royal Highness the fifth Prince." The woman in a palace dress smiled and waved her sleeves. Her gentle voice spread around the banquet. "Today is just a private banquet. Don't be so polite. Sit down." "Thank you, fourth Princess." After everyone was seated, fourth Princess glanced at the banquet. Finally, she paused at the seats of Su Li and Ling Li. Then she turned to Dong Fangyang and said with a smile, "I didn't expect that, fourth brother. You are so busy. You have time to attend my banquet. I'm really flattered." Dong Fangyang laughed and said, "Don't regard me as an outsider. It's my duty to support you." Dong Fangyuan nodded and said no more. Of course, she knew that Dong Fangyang was not here to support her. But she didn't want to offend her fifth brother for a credit. "Let me propose a toast to everyone first." Dong Fangyuan picked up the wine glass and said with a smile, "You are all newlyweds in Yunjing City in recent years. I wish you a happy life together." Many people were excited when they got the blessing of the princess. They picked up the wine glass and drank it up. They said in unison, "Thank you, princess." Su Li also picked up the wine glass and took a sip. She respected Dong Fangyuan. But Ling Li was eating and drinking by himself. He didn't pay attention to Dong Fangyuan at all. His position was extremely close to the front. Of course, his performance was spoiled. Noticing that everyone was looking at him, Ling Li raised his head and laughed. His mouth was full of food, which was very unappetizing. Even Su Li turned her head away without a trace. Dong Fangyuan hated Ling Li because of what happened in the past. Now she saw that Ling Li didn't change at all. She frowned slightly and then relaxed instantly. She said with a smile, "Brother Ling, are you reincarnated as a hungry ghost? Don't choke when you eat like this." Hearing Dongfang Yuyen's sarcasm, everyone was nervous. The lively banquet immediately quieted down. Cough cough. Ling Li seemed to be choked. He couldn't stop coughing. He grabbed the teacup in front of Su Li and drank it up. Then he hammered his chest a few times to catch his breath. He clicked his tongue and said, "Sister Yuyen, why haven't you cured your jinx after so many years?" Seeing that Ling Li dared to talk about the past, Dongfang Yuyen's face immediately darkened. Her chest rose and fell violently for several times before she calmed down. She turned her head and glanced at Su Li, who looked a little embarrassed. She felt a little better and snorted, "Well, for the sake of Sister Su Li, I won't argue with you today." With that, she clapped her hands lightly, and a group of dancers floated into the garden. They danced in the middle of the banquet, accompanied by the gentle melody coming from behind the fake mountain. Su Li looked at the dance floor and tasted the osmanthus wine. The banquet held by Dongfang Yuyen was really sincere. The wine used was the first-class osmanthus wine of the Linli building. It cost millions of taels of silver. "Honey, how was my performance today?" Ling Li suddenly leaned over and blew in her ear. His eyes were fixed on Su Li's bulging chest. His eyes seemed to be glowing. He almost reached out to touch it. An idea flashed in Su Li's mind, and she already understood Ling Li's meaning. She was a little ashamed and annoyed. She moved away imperceptibly. Tears appeared in her bright eyes, which seemed to be full of grievances. The man sitting next to Ling Li saw this scene and got angry immediately. If Ling Li didn't fail because of his inconvenience, he would rush forward to slap the playboy. At the same time, several people sighed in their hearts when they saw this scene. Third Master Ling was such a lecherous playboy. It was so pitiful that Princess Li fell into his hands. Dongfang Yuyen and Dongfang Yang saw this scene, but they were lost in thought at the same time. "Father asked me to invite Ling Li and Su Li to come here on the pretext of the banquet. Most of the purpose is to test them. I also see it. They seem to be in harmony, but they are actually in discord. Although Su Li has always shown a very obedient appearance, her grievances and dissatisfaction can't be hidden from me." Dongfang Yuyen sneered in her heart. What was father worried about? Did he really think that Ling Li and Su Li really loved each other and that the Ling family and Lord Rui's mansion would sincerely cooperate for great things? The Ling family had always disliked the Dongfang family. Uncle Rui cared about his daughter and had long been dissatisfied with Ling Li. Now the Ling family and Lord Rui's mansion might have been hostile to each other because of the marriage. Father was also old and muddled. He couldn't see through such a situation. It was better to pass the throne to her. As for the fifth brother, Dongfang Yin turned her head and glanced at Dongfang Yang lightly. Dongfang Yang seemed to feel it. He turned his head and showed a gentle and bright smile. "Fourth sister, is there anything on my face?" Dongfang Yuan was shocked and said with a smile, "Nothing. I just feel that you are more and more handsome these years. You must have fascinated many young ladies from aristocratic families. I don't know if you have a suitable one in mind. The position of princess can't always be empty, right?" "You are right, sister." Dongfang Yang nodded and said with a smile, "However, I think that a man should focus on his career. There is no need to rush to get married." Dongfang Yuan's smile was slightly stiff. She felt that Dongfang Yang's words had a hidden meaning. But at this moment, the sound of the zither behind the rockery suddenly became impassioned. The dancers heard it and stopped dancing. They stood in the middle in panic and confusion. Why did the musicians suddenly change their tune out of the blue? Dongfang Yuyen's face changed. She stood up and shouted softly, "Who dares to make trouble at my banquet? Come out!" Clang. The sound of the zither behind the rockery stopped immediately. Then, a girl who looked no older than 13 or 14 years old hopped out. Her big bright eyes were filled with innocence. She looked at all the stunned guests in the audience, but she was not surprised at all. She patted her chest and showed a sweet and innocent expression. You mortals. Listen to my fairy music. Kneel down and thank me." Dongfang Yuyen came to her sense and immediately didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Eighth sister, don't make trouble." The arrogant girl who came suddenly was Dongfang Huan. the 8th princess of the royal family mentioned by Dong Yang before. 4th sister. Dong Huan's eyes were bright. She trotted into Dong Yuyen's arms and snorted discontentedly, "You held such a lively banquet, but you didn't take me to play. Huang is very angry." Dong Yuyen's eyes were full of love. She smiled helplessly, "You came uninvited. Did you sneak out of the palace?" Dong Huan immediately covered her mouth guiltily and stopped talking. Her naive attitude instantly washed away the dissatisfaction in everyone's heart. It turned out that she was the famous naughty 8th princess. Now they saw her with their own eyes, and they all felt that the 8th princess was very simple and lovely. Su Li looked at Dong Huan, who acted like a spoiled child in Dong Yuyen's arms, and frowned slightly. She had never seen Dong Huan before, but she felt that she was very familiar with her. Besides, her intuition that Dong Huan's nonsense was true. What's wrong? Don't be in a daze. Dong Huan is talking to you. Ling Li transmitted the sound in silence suddenly. Su Li was suddenly shocked and came to her senses. She saw Dong Huan pointing at her and saying, "Are you Su Li from the 8th uncle's family? I heard that you are the first talented girl in Yunjing City in the palace. You are good at zither, chess, calligraphy and painting. But you are only 16 years old. Even if you started to learn in your mother's womb, you can't be an all-rounder, right? I don't believe it." "Huang, don't be rude. You should call her sister." Dong Yuyen frowned slightly. Why did this girl suddenly start to target Su Li? In fact, she had a good impression of Su Li and even sympathized with her. Compared with her husband, Ling Li was obviously worse. Dong Huan snorted and reluctantly called, "Sister Su Li." Su Li heard it and smiled slightly. Her red lips slightly opened. Her clear and sweet voice echoed in the forest garden, "Sister Huan is right. Although I have studied for a few years and learned skills for a few years, I can't be the first talented girl in Yunjing City." As soon as she said that, many people who were still fascinated by her voice were immediately shocked. Someone immediately defended her, "Princess Li, why do you say that? Your teaching in the affiliated school of the National Academy is more wonderful and erudite than that of the old teacher in the National Academy. All of us can see that. You deserve the title of the first talented girl. I heard that you used to be the workshop owner of the embroidery workshop in the Qinghe province. Your embroidery skills are also top. You are the best embroidery artificer at the age of 16 in the whole Dahan country. More than that, I heard that you are also good at cooking. The famous beggar's chicken in Yunjing City was created by you." Many people who didn't know Su Li were confused. At the same time, they doubted whether the sources of the news were true or false. There were too many people fishing for fame. Su Li could win the favor of all men in Yunjing City with her beautiful face. Did she need to learn those things? Dong Huan saw so many people standing up to speak for Su Li. It seemed that she was humiliated. She became angry and said, "Everyone says you are good. I don't believe it. Since you are proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy and painting, do you dare to compete with me in zither skills?" After she said that, the noise in the field immediately quieted down. Many people looked at Su Li with a touch of expectation in their eyes. If they could appreciate Su Li's music, their trip would be worthwhile, and they would have the capital to brag in front of their friends in the future. Before Su Li spoke, a rude voice suddenly sounded and disrupted Dong Huan's rhythm. "What do you mean? Little girl, how dare you ask my wife to compete with you in zither? It is enough for me to listen to my wife's music. How can I let you ordinary people listen to it? Do you deserve it?" Chapter 279. Dong Huan was extremely favored. She was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She had never been looked down upon like this. Her eyes turned red immediately. She grabbed the corner of Dong Yuyen's clothes with one hand. She was so angry that she almost cried. She said angrily like an angry lion, "Ling Li, you bastard! You will die a horrible death. Sister, do you see him bully me like this? Help me get justice." Dongfang Yuyan's expression changed slightly. She quickly stopped Dongfang Huan. Some words couldn't be said casually. For Ling Li, the most taboo was to curse him to death. After all, people with disabled legs couldn't practice martial arts because of blocked tendons and veins. Their life was very short. Dongfang Yuyan comforted her sister and looked up at Ling Li. As expected, she saw anger flashing in his eyes. She didn't know what trouble he was going to make. Considering the overall situation, Dongfang Yuyan had to bite her teeth and said, You are too serious. Apologize to your brother Ling Li. Apologize? Brother Ling Li. Dongfang Huan's eyes immediately widened. Was this the fourth sister who always loved and took care of her? At this moment, Dongfang Yang suddenly said, I think what my sister said is not unreasonable. Ling Li, sister-in-law's talent should not be buried for anyone. You want to put everything of sister-in-law on the shelf for your own selfishness. Isn't it too much? What? Ling Li frowned suddenly. Dongfang Yang's words were really vicious. He included righteousness in a few words. If he continued to pester endlessly, it might cause everyone to condemn him. Thinking of this, he glanced at other people's faces. As expected, many people were angry and had bad intentions. Although he had long been accustomed to this scene, if he continued to insist, it was not the quality that a playboy who bullied the weak and feared the strong should have. Subconsciously, he wanted to transmit the sound to Su Li to ask for her opinion. But before he took any action, Su Li transmitted the sound to him first. Agree with him. Beg me. Ling Li was so smart that he immediately understood Su Li's meaning. But the transmission was so straightforward that he couldn't help but be angry. His expression didn't escape the eyes of others. But it happened to be in line with the helplessness of being forced. After a while, Ling Li's expression softened. He turned his head and whispered in Su Li's ear, Honey, I also think what the fifth prince said is reasonable. Why don't you play a song for him today? Ling Li's voice was very low, but almost everyone present had cultivation. They heard Ling Li's words clearly and immediately had a more intuitive impression of the third master of the Ling family. He gave in. He gave in just like that. As expected, he was a spineless coward who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Zhao Xiyuan frowned, his heart burning with anger. Why does the fifth prince force Princess Li to compete with eighth princess? Even I can see that Princess Li is unwilling. Although Ling Li is a little selfish, he also helped Princess Li accidentally. If fifth prince didn't say that, Gu Shijio said, Princess Li is not willing to do that. He couldn't figure out why Dongfang Yang, whom he had high hopes for, behaved like a playboy like Ma Jintian instead of a gentleman. His words were despicable. Could it be that he was wrong? For the first time, he wavered in his belief. But soon he was desperate. Except for the fifth prince, who else in the royal family could make him fulfill his ambition and sacrifice his blood? It turned out that he had long known that there was only one choice in front of him. Su Li heard Ling Li's words. Although her expression was still calm, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. The disappointment was not obvious, but it was just caught by Dongfang Yuyan and Dongfang Yang. Immediately, both of them slightly raised their lips. It seemed that they had great confidence in the relationship between Ling Li and Su Li. Since eighth princess invited me, there is no reason for me to refuse. But I am not proficient in the zither. Let's not compete and play a song for tonight's banquet. Su Li's voice was gentle and soft. It seemed that there was a magical power to calm the hostility in everyone's heart. Her reasonable words were also admirable. In such a situation, Princess Li could take the overall situation into consideration and didn't fall out with Ling Li. She was really not an ordinary woman. Zhao Xiyuan's eyes flashed with deep admiration. He suddenly stood up and cupped his hands. Princess Li is reasonable, which is really commendable. We have no regret to listen to your zither. How dare we ask for more? Zhao Xiyuan said what many people thought. Someone immediately echoed, Yes, yes. Child Zhao is right. I really admire Princess Li's state of mind. Even if she is not proficient in the zither, I believe that we can also gain something from the zither. Princess Li, please. We are all ears. Seeing such a scene, Dongfang Yang and Dongfang Yan's heart sank. They only tried to test the relationship between Su Li and Su Li, but ignored her personal charm. Now, being forced by them, Su Li's noble character of being pure in the mud was highlighted. Immediately, this group of scholars who read books were willing to be loyal to Su Li. Is it because of her nature or because she is scheming? Dongfang Yang was full of doubts. It was the first time for him to get close to Su Li, so he couldn't help but be a little confused. At this time, Su Li had already sat behind the zither behind the rockery. A group of musicians around her stood far away with expectation. The whole banquet hall was also quiet. Even if people ate, they chewed slowly for fear that the sound would disturb Su Li's zither. In such a waiting, Su Li's beautiful eyes were slightly gloomy. Her eyelashes under the stone lamp trembled slightly. Her fingertips stroked the zither strings one by one. In the previous life, before Ling Li was alive, she didn't learn zither. After Ling Li died, she fell into the evil circle and it was impossible for her to learn zither. Until she met Jing Xian, she calmed down and learned a lot of elegant things that she was not qualified to master. Thinking of this, clang, the zither strings vibrated and a soothing tone like a clear spring flowed out. An extremely sad emotion also passed into everyone's heart along with the tone. This is the business from the heart and the music from the heart? Dong Fenghuan was shocked and slightly opened her mouth. She was no longer arrogant. This was the highest realm of the zither circle. In this realm, the superficial level of zither skills was nothing. What really touched people's hearts were the feelings contained in the music. Even the master who had been teaching her in the imperial palace was far less emotional than Su Li. Dong Fenghuan stared blankly at the direction blocked by the rockery. Then she looked at the people in the banquet hall who were intoxicated by the zither and burst into tears. She sighed and couldn't compare with Su Li anymore. She still remembered the master's words and knew what a genius Su Li was. If Su Li intended to enter the circle with zither, she was likely to break through the inborn realm before the age of 20 and become a young master. Dong Fenghuan couldn't help sweating on her forehead. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, both Su Li and the Ling family and Lord Rui's mansion had very shallow knowledge. As long as she went back and told her father, the news tonight should not be exposed. Dong Fenghuan was relaxed. She inadvertently caught a glimpse of Ling Li's moved expression and was in a trance. She couldn't help but laugh secretly. She didn't expect that this idiot, who was full of women, could have some reaction. It was really hard for him. She didn't think about it carefully. Then she also immersed herself in the zither and absorbed the inspiration from it. She would definitely make great progress in the circle of zither. Ling Li stared blankly at the direction of the rockery. It seemed that his eyes could penetrate the rockery and fall on the beautiful figure who was playing the zither. Although he had never heard this song, he was familiar with it from the bottom of his heart. It seemed that he had heard it somewhere before. Such a strange thing would make him full of speculations in normal times. But now he just wanted to immerse himself in the sad zither sound and feel the message passed by Su Li. Su Li closed her eyes. She moved her hands according to her heart. She didn't need to deliberately control it. Who thinks of the heaven and earth? Can't predict the movement of the earth? Living with the heaven and earth for a long time, the hair on the temples is like frost. Infatuated with the universe and the wilderness, looking forward to the passing of winter and summer, I wish the years will pass and the autumn harvest hidden in the winter. Longing for the dew has turned into frost. Looking forward to where you are now, wishing to go to the killing field with hatred, punishing the evildoers, or returning with the emperor and dying only the old wine. How can I bear the red candlelight is cold. Looking forward to my return, my soul is wandering hand in hand with you. Have not returned, can't bear to see the stars and the mansions. Who has read the 1,000-word essay Autumn Harvest and Winter Hide? On the way to Hellas, it a long way to go alone. Hate, only hate. I can't accompany you on this trip. My husband, what is this book? Isn't the dictionary of Dahan enough for me to learn words? It's not enough. I want you to write this down. 1,000-word classic? Yes, it's an essay from my hometown. There is only one in the world. Seeing her husband showing a rare proud look, the disfigured wife nodded with a smile even though she didn't believe it. Darling, you are right. The heaven and earth are mysterious and yellow, the universe is primitive, the sun and the moon are full. Darling, what is this word? This word is to be read. Don't be anxious. I will accompany you every day until you can understand the thousands of books in the world. Darling, clang. At the end of the song, Su Li slowly put down her hands. Tears had wet her face unconsciously. She took a deep breath and ran the genuine energy to dry the tears. Then she calmed down. Perhaps it was because there were too many things weighing down on her heart that she had been living a very depressing life. Now, through this piece of music, she had vented some of it and felt a lot more relaxed. When Su Li walked out from behind the rockery, everyone suddenly came to their senses. They suddenly found that they had shed tears, and the sadness lingered in their hearts for a long time. Dongfang Yuyen and Dongfang Yang were also not spared. No matter how evil they were, everyone had a soft spot in their heart. Princess Li's song really surprised me. There is such a fairy song in the world. We are embarrassed. Dongfang Yuyen wiped her tears and adjusted herself quickly. She said first. Dongfang Yang hadn't come out of the sadness. He nodded absent-mindedly and was no longer in high spirits. Listening to Princess Li's song is better than reading a book of sages. I have a difficult thing in my heart, but after listening to this song, I have the answer. Now I can't wait to implement it. Fourth Princess, goodbye. Princess Li untied the knot in my heart. I can only repay you later. My wife, I want to go back to my hometown. Would you like to go with me? Princess Li, thank you. The banquet was noisy, but there was no sense of impetuosity. Everyone was grateful to Su Li and left with complicated feelings. After this song, the banquet obviously couldn't go on. Su Li responded with a faint smile and sent people away one after another. She was at peace. The crisis tonight finally passed. Chapter 280. The guests who hadn't left were shocked. Dongfang Yuyen reacted in time and shouted, "Where are the guards?" Swish, swish. The royal guards hiding around the garden immediately showed up. The heavy cavalry brought people a strong sense of security and immediately calmed down the commotion. Su Li glanced around and saw an acquaintance. Hu Daiden of the royal guards, the former subordinate of Wu Bin. Commander Hu, take people outside to see what happened. Dongfang Yuyen hurriedly ordered. Hu Daiden didn't dare to delay and immediately rushed out of the courtyard. After a while, he came back with an ugly face. Fourth Princess, something happened. Dongfang Yuyen's face changed slightly and she followed him out. The guests behind her didn't dare to leave the protection range of the royal guards and followed her closely. Su Li pushed Ling Li's wheelchair and came last. At a glance, she saw the corpse lying on the ground. She thought for a moment and remembered the identity of this person. She was a miss from an ordinary aristocratic family. However, the face of this miss now looked more like an old woman. Her whole body was pale, as if her blood had been sucked dry by something. Many misses from aristocratic families turned their heads and hid in their husbands' arms, shivering. Such a horrible death made even Hu Daiden, who had seen a lot of ferocious things in these years, couldn't help but feel cold. Dongfang Yuyen realized the seriousness of the situation. She meditated for a while and said decisively, "Contact the Supreme Judiciary and let them come to take over the case immediately. In addition, Commander Hu, please escort the guests at my banquet home. Don't make any mistakes." Dongfang Yuyen's worry was reasonable. No one knew whether the murderer was still hiding around. It was easy to deal with the family of the dead woman who was not powerful. But if one or two powerful juniors of the family died, it would be really a big deal. Maybe it would cause a storm like the child of the Ma family last time. Fourth Princess, don't worry. This is the fault of the royal guards. I will not let the same thing happen again. Hu Daiden solemnly nodded his head and immediately gave the order. One by one, the couples left under his meticulous arrangements. The Ling family's status was respected, so they naturally received special attention from Hu Daiden. He assigned 2 small teams to escort them away. Ling Mo and Yun Yi naturally wouldn't say anything, Although they all knew that if the hidden murderer was really more powerful than the two people in the sedan chair, the two pairs of guards couldn't stop him at all. The sky wasn't dark yet, and there were pedestrians walking on the road from time to time. It seemed calm and peaceful, and there was nothing unusual about it. Although Ling Li wanted to ask about the music, he had to focus on it first because of what had happened. He transmitted the sound, "You are proficient in pharmacology. What do you think about the corpse?" Su Li glanced at Ling Li lightly and shook her head. She didn't speak. Ling Li frowned slightly and glanced at Su Li's arm. With his eyesight, he could vaguely see the scab wound through the gauze. He had an intuition that Su Li became extremely thrifty after marriage. What she saved was not money, but genuine energy. It was clear that genuine energy could speed up the healing of wounds, but she would rather keep the wounds to heal themselves. And the transmission of sound. The transmission of sound consumed very little genuine energy, almost negligible. But when Su Li went to the banquet with him, she only transmitted a short message when Dong Fong Yang forced her. Why was that? No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't figure out why the genuine energy was saved. The hidden pneuma in Su Li's body was obviously closer to the longevity realm than his. Only Su Li knew that she was in a state of only using strength. Every time she used her strength, she would be one step closer to death. If it wasn't necessary, she didn't want to waste a bit of foundation. The carriage returned to the Ling mansion safely. The captain of the royal guards who escorted them said some polite words and left. Su Li and Ling Mo were caught by Chiu Meng for a while, and then they returned to the east courtyard to restore peace. After a rest, Yun Yi and Ling Mo kept watch outside the study. Su Li brought a cup of tea to prevent Chiu Meng from checking. Then she sat next to the bookshelf and said inexplicably, "Although I learned from the miracle-working doctor, the miracle-working doctor is not a coroner. I just took a look at him. What can I think? However, there are countless books in your cult. Maybe there are records of evil martial arts similar to this." Ling Li raised his eyebrows slightly and realized that Su Li was answering his question on the carriage. Although her voice was still cold, he heard some worry in her words. It seemed that Li had a guess in her heart. Thinking of this, Ling Li immediately asked Ling Mo to call Ling Qinglan and asked him to consult the classics in the cult. At the same time, he was more convinced of one thing. Su Li was indeed saving the use of genuine energy. Could it be that the rain that day had left behind some sort of aftereffect? Recalling the situation at that time, Ling Li was shocked. He only cared about dealing with the contradiction between him and Su Li, but he ignored a very important point. That day, who was seriously injured. Ling Li looked up at Su Li, who still had her back to him. He wanted to ask several times, but he was finally dispelled by Su Li's deliberate indifference. He knew that even if he asked, he wouldn't get an answer. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that the third elder wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. It seemed that there was something hidden from him. But at this moment, the third elder had returned to the mountain to practice in isolation. He could only ask after the third elder came out. Next to the bookshelf, Su Li looked down at the book in her hand, but her thoughts drifted far away. Ling Li's eyes were so bright that he didn't hide it. She naturally felt it. However, what was the use of confessing? She simply took advantage of the last time to finish all the things she wanted to do. Everything was her choice. She didn't want to make anyone feel guilty. She could only say sorry to the person she let down in her heart. If there was another life, she would repay him. As for the time of her death, she would hide it as long as she could. The corpse found today really made her guess. In the previous life, she was a female devil who made people in the martial arts circle tremble with fear. There was another emerging devil who was as famous as her, named Shuexie. Strictly speaking, she was no different from Shuexie in the previous life. They both killed innocent people for their own interests. Shuexie liked to devour human blood to improve her cultivation, and she used human as medicine to refine elixirs. At that time, the martial arts circle gave them a title, Evil Duo of Blood and Elixir. Although this title brought her relationship with Shuexie closer, in fact, she didn't know Shuexie at all. She only wanted to improve her cultivation and revenge, so she was very careful. Shui Xie was much more unscrupulous than her. Before long, she was besieged and killed by the righteous sections. After that, there was only Elixir Demon in the martial arts circle, but no Blood Demon. Today's murder happened. From the scream to the people going out to check, it only took a few seconds. The woman's blood was sucked dry and she died. This action naturally made him think of Shui Xie. However, at this time in the previous life, Shui Xie hadn't been born, so she was not sure. But in this life, she had changed too many things. No one knew whether the butterfly effect had affected the process of the birth of Blood Demon. Ling Qinglan just received the case and was confused. After receiving the news from Ling Li, he immediately had a direction and began to investigate. After a few days, it seemed that because of the intervention of the Supreme Judiciary, the murderer didn't appear again. The panic caused by the corpse was slightly relieved. In the evening, Yun Yi took a letter and sent it to Su Li. The letter paper was very special. The material was not like paper, but like bark. It felt a little rough and there was no mark on it. Su Li took it and her eyes flashed. She was no stranger to the unique wood grain paper of the spiritual realm. In the previous life, she also learned the craft of making this paper and exchanged it for cultivation resources. While recalling, Su Li had already unfolded the letter. There were only a few numbers on it. In the middle of the night, let's talk in the spiritual realm, Jing Exin. After reading it, Su Li immediately got up and left the Ling Mansion from the secret passage. After many days, the Ling Mansion had been used to her existence. It was much more convenient for her to move. She didn't need to be as troublesome as before. This time, Su Li came to the stronghold of the spiritual realm from the Linli building without alarming anyone. When she just arrived at the door, she saw Chu Shao greeting her respectfully. He saluted and said, "Senior, Great Lord has been waiting for you on the top floor for a long time." Su Li nodded gently, "Please lead the way." "Senior, you are welcome," Chu Shao said politely. He didn't dare to neglect and quickly led Su Li in. At this moment, he was much more respectful than before. Although he reported Su Li's news without delay, Great Lord came to Dahan country in person after a few days, which made him immediately realize that Su Li's identity was more terrible than he imagined. After sending Su Li to the attic on the top floor, Chu Shao left consciously. Su Li's heart beat slightly faster. She stepped forward and opened the door. A woman in white with her back to her immediately came into view. Sensing Su Li's coming, she turned around and showed a face. This face could be said to be extremely ordinary without any beauty. But it was not ugly. It could only be said to be ordinary and inconspicuous. If she was put into the crowd, she would be immediately drowned by people and couldn't make any waves. However, such an ordinary woman with no sense of existence at this moment gave Su Li the feeling that she was faintly integrated into the nothingness, as if she was not in the mortal world but standing in the fairy land. "You finally think of me." The woman smiled slightly, and the first sentence revealed a lot of things. Su Li didn't know why. After seeing Jing Exin, she immediately calmed down. It was a sense of peace that no one could give her. This feeling was exactly the same as in the previous life. Hearing Jing Exin's words, Su Li also chuckled, "Jing Exin, you still remember me." The relationship between her and Jing Exin was unclear. In the previous life, she was saved by Jing Exin. She was so grateful and even wanted to follow her. But Jing Exin asked her to treat her as a friend. Later, after getting along with her, she and Jing Exin became more like a teacher and a friend. Therefore, Su Li directly called Jing Exin by her name. Chapter 281. Broken Ring. This was the first time that Su Li heard this word from the mouth of someone outside Mei Ruhan's consciousness. She nodded slightly to admit it. Seeing Jing Exin's joyful look quickly become gloomy and sad, she was stunned. A sense of déjà vu emerged in her heart. It seemed that she had known Jing Exin a long time ago, even earlier than the previous life. "And it seems that you know a lot." Su Li's tone was very calm. Now that the situation was established, although she had doubts in her heart, her desire to explore the cause and effect was not strong. What could she do even if she knew? If she couldn't be revived, everything would be illusory. After more than an hour, Jing Exen calmed down. The sadness on her face faded away and was replaced by determination. Just as she was about to say something, the nothingness suddenly shook violently. The cracks in the nothingness tore directly and formed a black hole in the blink of an eye. The horrible and violent pneuma swept out with a warning. Su Li's pupils shrank suddenly, and her hair stood on end. The power that suddenly appeared was like the power of heaven. Only a wisp of it was enough to make her body collapse and disappear. This was definitely not the power of the longevity realm. Even the legendary supernatural realm could not directly tear the nothingness and form a black hole. What level of power was this? Su Li's scalp was cold. She looked at Jing Exen, but there was no fear on her face. Instead, she was furious. Warning? By now, you old things still think that I will care about any warning? Jing Exen sneered again and again. Her voice was cold. She waved her sleeves and the black hole was closed directly. A ray of pure light that Su Li couldn't notice shot into the black hole before it was closed. Then, a miserable howl came out. Even though the nothingness had returned to its original state, Su Li could still hear it clearly. Seeing such a magical scene beyond her imagination, Su Li was shocked, but not shocked. She had a vague feeling that she once had this kind of means in her memory. Outside the nothingness, a spiritual body suddenly collapsed and lost its mind. Numerous angry and embarrassed voices resounded, and there were young and old, men and women amongst them, and there were actually no less than 1,000 of them. How dare you! This realm spirit only has a trace of spiritual wisdom after we carefully cultivated it for 10 years. Jing Exen dared to kill it. Elder Mo Qin, since Jing Exen took the initiative to take action, the previous agreement, how dare you? It must be your people who cheated in secret and violated the agreement, which completely annoyed Jing Exen. Otherwise, how could Jing Exen suddenly kill you regardless of your master's safety? What a joke! This treasure belongs to your Yushu sect. How can we find it? Don't tell me you want me to mention it a second time. You're just a woman. I can't be bothered to bicker with you. Once this world is over, we'll settle this. Along with this cold grunt, the surroundings quietened down, but a strand of uneasiness lingered in Elder Mo Qin's heart, causing her to frown with worry. Why did the people of Zihan's sect suddenly become so easy to talk to? Could it be that something really happened in the mirror? Let's not talk about the debate outside the nothingness. At this moment, Su Li looked at Jing Exen, who was kneeling in front of her and couldn't help but feel shocked. Jing Exen, the dignified lord of the spiritual realm, had a high status. For Su Li, she was more like a master. She should kneel to Jing Exen. But just kneeling was obviously not the focus of Jing Exen's determination. What she said next made Su Li fall into a sluggish state. Master, Jing Exen is guilty. Master. Su Li seemed to think that she had an auditory hallucination. She confirmed again, You call me master? Master, I have been with you for 900 years. How can I be wrong? 900 years? Su Li was silent. She lived no more than 50 years in her 2 lives. But if what Jing Exen said was true, the origin of the foundation in the bracelet could be explained a little. Jing Exen saw the strangeness and doubt in Su Li's eyes, and she couldn't help but feel bitter. She had become the spirit of the treasure, so she naturally knew the characteristics of this treasure better. As long as Su Li didn't go out for a day, the original memory would not appear. Even so, Jing Exen couldn't help but say, You are Su Li, the first holy girl of Yushu sect, the first sect in Jiuzhou region. There are too many reasons. You don't have original memory now, so I can't explain it clearly. I can't figure out why you broke the bracelet? Jing Exen said with tears in her eyes, Although the life bracelet can save your life, it also has a fatal drawback. You broke the bracelet on your own initiative, so there is only one result. Will my soul be destroyed? Su Li suddenly said in a calm tone. Jing Exen opened her eyes widely. You know it, but why? Su Li shook her head. It's too late to know all this now. Have you heard the name Mei Ruhan? Mei Ruhan. Jing Xian's eyes immediately brightened, and she showed extreme hatred. Master, Mei Ruhan is your junior sister apprentice. She is the second inherited disciple of Yushu sect. Although she doesn't have the title of holy girl like you, her cultivation has reached the Jindan realm. You can't underestimate her. Master, is it because of her that you changed? Su Li was thoughtful. There was a lot of unrevealed information in her words. At this moment, she didn't know why she suddenly thought of what the old beggar said when she first came to Yunjing City. Sure enough, the world is fake and people can't be counted. The world is fake. Could it be that this world is fake at all? Jing Xian, where is the Jiuzhou region that you told me? I have lived 2 lives. Why have I never heard of it? Jing Xian was embarrassed when she heard the words. It seemed that she was considering whether her master, who had lost all her memories, could accept it if she told the truth. Seeing Jing Xian's reaction, Su Li narrowed her eyes and said slowly, "Is it possible that there are other worlds besides this one?" Jing Xian was shocked when she heard the words, "Master, do you remember it?" Su Li shook her head. "I do feel a little familiar with you, but I just feel familiar with you. I have no impression of the Jiuzhou region and Yushu sect that you mentioned." Jing Xian couldn't help but show a touch of disappointment, but she quickly recovered and said quickly, "Master, the spiritual body outside was used to monitor me. Although it was killed by me, it will soon appear again. The truth can't be told in 3 days and 3 nights. We don't have so much time, so we have to make a long story short. To be exact, this world is not a world at all, but an illusory realm created by a treasure. The outside world is the real world. As for the name of that world, I don't know. This treasure is called the reincarnation mirror. In those days, this treasure made many forces jealous, and they attacked Yushu sect together. Because of the disaster of destroying the sect, you had to choose to take the risk and open the reincarnation mirror. You let all the young people in the Jiuzhou region enter it and made an agreement to compete for the dominance of the reincarnation mirror according to their abilities. At that time, you were already the half-owner of the reincarnation mirror. From the beginning, the whole dreamland revolved around you. However, I don't know what method Zihan sect used, but they forcibly transferred the qi to Su Zipei of their sect, which caused your fate to plummet and you suffered a lot. I was your servant. At that time, the situation was critical, so I had to sacrifice myself. Speaking of this, suddenly there was a slight fluctuation in the nothingness. Jing Xian's face changed slightly, and her voice stopped abruptly. She waved a gentle force to send Su Li out of the spiritual realm. At the same time, Jing Xian's last words came to her ears. "Master, since you have broken the bracelet, you don't have to worry about what to do. Leave the outside world to me." After the voice came out, the scene in front of Su Li changed. She was already in a quiet broken temple. The morning sun shone through the cracks on the roof, which seemed quiet and soft. But at this moment, Su Li was more confused and complicated than ever. Jing Xian could kill the existence of tearing the nothingness with a wave of her hand. There was no need for her to lie to herself. What she said was probably true. But if what she said was true, everything that she had always believed in and stuck to would be subverted with the end of this life. Everything in the illusion, including relatives, friends, even Ling Li, was fake. Then what was the point of continuing? At this moment, Su Li fell into a confusion that she had never experienced before. 2 days had passed unconsciously. In the past 2 days, except that the Supreme Judiciary was very busy, the Lin Li building, the Yinma cult and the Dongfang family were all very calm. The sudden appearance of the evil circle made all forces in Yunjing City not as tense as before, and they had a chance to breathe. However, everyone in the game knew that when the murderer was caught, the ensuing waves would be more turbulent. "Li, you have been restless these days. Did this brat bully you?" During the dinner, Chiu Meng asked with concern. Ling Li stopped eating and looked up at Su Li. Even his mother could see that Su Li was in a bad state, so could he. But no matter how he asked, Su Li didn't answer and looked at him strangely, as if she was confirming something. Facing Chiu Meng's question, Su Li was still rational. Finally, she didn't ignore her. She forced a smile and said, "Mother, I'm fine. I just miss home recently." "I see." Chiao Meng suddenly understood. She thought of the hardships that Su Li had suffered since she was a child. She couldn't help but feel distressed. She said, "It's my negligence. You and your father just met each other, and then you married here. You should miss home. Tomorrow, Ling Li will accompany you to visit your family. It doesn't matter if you stay for a few more days." "Thank you, mother." Seeing that Su Li agreed and smiled, Chiao Meng was relieved and didn't care about it anymore. The next morning, Chiao Meng ordered people to prepare carriages and guards and let Ling Li accompany her to the Lord Rui's mansion. Dong Feng-rui was overjoyed to see his daughter coming back. He quickly asked Wu Bin to arrange a family banquet. The food was the best of the Baisho building. Even if it was simply processed, it would be delicious. What's more, it was the chief chef of the Baisho building who prepared it. Ling Li also stopped acting and paid a formal visit to his father-in-law, which relieved Dong Feng-rui's worries and made him feel gratified. Chapter 282. Perhaps because of Dong Feng-rui's meticulous care and Ling Li's care, Su Li seemed to recover some spirit after living in the Lord Rui's mansion for 3 days. She was no longer in a trance. These days, Ling Li didn't relax his investigation. He wanted to know where Su Li went that night. But no matter how he investigated, he couldn't find any clues. In desperation, Ling Li had to give up the investigation temporarily. The second brother had gone to battle. Half of the people he trained had rushed to the battlefield in Nanjiang country. There were not enough people in Yunjing City. After living in the Lord Rui's mansion for half a month, Su Li returned to the Ling mansion with Ling Li. In the past half a month, many people in Yunjing City were drained of blood and died. The Supreme Judiciary didn't catch the murderer. The emperor was furious and asked the Chun Palace of the Ministry of Penalty to thoroughly investigate the case and catch the murderer. Ling Qinglan was very busy. Ling Li was in charge of the war in Nanjiang country. He had no time to hang around outside. Time passed quietly. Su Li's heart was completely at peace. She was no longer tired by Jing Xian's words. She had already read Yin Xuetong's letter. The decision of Fang Yuan and others made her feel at ease. At least after she left, even without Wen Tingshan's support, Fang Yuan's cultivation was enough to be independent. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. It was early autumn. It drizzled in Yunjing City. There were fewer pedestrians outside. It was very quiet and peaceful. The air was mixed with rain and mist with a trace of coolness. Su Li sat in the front porch of the study and watched the rain running down the eaves. A light flashed in her eyes. She was no longer confused. During this time, she figured out a lot and remembered a lot of details. Even her memory of the outside world was vaguely restored because of the broken ring. At this moment, she no longer cared about the truth or falsehood. Jing Xian's knowledge was not comprehensive and she didn't know much. But the hints given to her were enough. Although the scene of the illusion couldn't be real, it should be used as a reference. Jiuzhou region was probably a place where sects gathered like the spiritual circle. Yushu sect was one of the sections. Su Li just didn't know the strength of the sect. However, a sect that possessed a treasure like the reincarnation mirror would definitely have a powerful background. The younger generation of the sects in Jiuzhou region all gathered in the realm of reincarnation. The world was fake, but the people in it were real. The feelings between people naturally couldn't be fake. The life ring was a treasure that could save one's life. She had already confirmed the drawbacks through herself. It was obvious what the life-saving effect was protecting. It was the soul. Except for the anomaly in Mei Ruhan's mind, everyone who entered the realm of reincarnation should abandon their memories. Their souls were like newborn souls integrated into the reincarnation Tao of the realm of reincarnation. Naturally, they needed protection. Moreover, the so-called sects in Jiuzhou region would be on guard against her, the real owner of the reincarnation mirror. She couldn't kill anyone in the illusion unless the ring was broken. Thinking of this, a sharp light flashed in Su Li's eyes, as if the air in front of her was cut open. Ling Xian and even Zhu Yan might not have died, but they had returned to the outside world. While thinking of the two, Mei Ruhan's figure appeared in Su Li's mind again. Her eyes were complicated for a moment and soon returned to coldness. Mei Ruhan, who had no memory of her predecessor in the reincarnation mirror, had no malice to her. But the consciousness in her mind caused her to end up like this. She must erase it. Even if she didn't say it, Jing Xian would not let her go. Maybe the consciousness had been annihilated now. But whether Jing Xian was still fighting with the existence in the nothingness, Su Li couldn't know, let alone find her. Are all the people who enter here the younger generation? Su Li muttered to herself. She didn't know how old the definition of the younger generation in that world was. Jing Xian said that she had followed her for 900 years, so her real age was at least 900 years old. Such a young soul could incarnate into any age level when she came to the reincarnation mirror. According to Jing Xian, it's no wonder that Su Zipei could ascend to the position of empress in the previous life. She took my luck, and the whole world revolved around her. The more I assassinated, the stronger the backlash of luck. That's why I ended up dying tragically. In this life, with the help of Jing Xian, I was the owner of the reincarnation mirror. Naturally, luck gathered. It was quite smooth all the way, and there were almost no particularly dangerous obstacles. One doubt after another was solved through constant confirmation. Su Li's thinking became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, her chest tightened, and she thought of a problem that made her feel suffocated. Ling Li, if he was also transformed by someone from the outside world, would he still remember her after he went out? Would he still remember that he had a wife in a false world? Or, everything was really an illusion? After she died, all kinds of things between her and Ling Li would also disappear, leaving no trace? Thinking of this, Su Li's face instantly turned pale, and her mind trembled. Blood surged from her throat, and she fainted on the ground. Ling Li, who heard the movement in the room, was confused. He spread out his psychic awareness a little and saw the situation outside the room. Suddenly, his face changed dramatically, and his mind went blank. He couldn't care about anything anymore. He rushed to the door, picked up Su Li and rushed into the room. The door was closed. Tang Lei, who just walked to the door of the yard, saw the last moment. He was so shocked that he couldn't help rubbing his eyes. Seeing the closed door of the study, he couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Is it because of losing weight that my eyes are damaged? Why did I see Brother Li stand up just now?" With a trace of doubt, Tang Lei moved closer. When he was about to open the door of the study to find out, Ling Mo suddenly appeared like a ghost. Tang Lei was so scared that his soul almost flew away. Master said that now no one is allowed to get close to the study. Master Tang, you come at the wrong time. Please. Hearing Ling Mo's cold words, Tang Lei was not angry. He had long been used to the temper of Brother Li, the servant, but, in the daytime, what can Brother Li do? Why must he stay in the study? Tang Lei looked strange, and suddenly a very absurd idea came to his mind. He blushed. He knew that the idea was absurd, but it was reasonable for Brother Li. Ling Mo, did you see who Brother Li carried into the study just now? Tang Lei suddenly asked. Ling Mo looked slightly serious, and his tone remained unchanged. No, the door of the study has been closed since the morning. Sure enough, I was wrong, Tang Lei murmured. Thinking that he didn't see Su Li in the wing room just now, he suddenly smiled and said in a wretched voice, "It has been almost 4 hours since the morning. I didn't expect that Brother Li's ability is not inferior to mine." Ling Mo's face darkened. Tang Lei really dared to say anything. If it was heard by Madame, the result would be, thinking of Madame, Ling Mo was worried. He glanced at the room and finally dragged Tang Lei, who wanted to peep, away. Now the two people in the room couldn't stand to be disturbed. At this moment, on a wide soft bed in the study room, Ling Li was healing Su Li's wounds by running his cultivation. The soft bed in the room was originally used for Ling Li's rest. Later, after he married Su Li, it was immediately changed by Chiu Meng to a big bed that could accommodate 2 people. After a while, Su Li woke up slowly. She felt the warm, genuine energy coming from her back. Her body was stiff for a while, and then a lingering fear rose in her heart. Fortunately, In order to slow down the consumption of the practice method in her body, she sealed 99% of her cultivation. Otherwise, with her protective genuine energy of the longevity realm, if Ling Li ran genuine energy into her body rashly, he would be seriously injured in an instant. In just half a year, Su Li easily promoted to the longevity realm with her foundation. She deliberately saved consumption and reduced the practice speed. Otherwise, it would be several times faster. However, Ling Li's cultivation still stayed at the peak of the inborn realm. It seemed that there was only a thin line between him and the longevity realm. But no one knew when the thin line would be broken. Noticing that Su Li woke up, Ling Li breathed a sigh of relief, but he still didn't dare to relax. He asked with concern, "Li, how do you feel now?" But in the middle of the words, Ling Li suddenly felt something wrong. He frowned for a moment and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He subconsciously used the name Fith again. In order not to annoy Su Li, he hadn't called Su Li like this for more than half a year. Su Li was stunned. She recalled her thoughts before she fainted. After a moment of silence, she got up and got out of bed. When she walked a few steps and was about to leave, she inadvertently saw that the wheelchair was still in front of the table outside. Her figure came to a standstill. At the same time, the disappointment on Ling Li's face also turned into astonishment, because he saw Su Li suddenly turned around and smiled at him. "My body is fine. Don't be so impulsive in the future. The Ling family can't afford the royal family strife." Su Li's tone was so light that no emotion could be detected. But Ling Li felt the long-lost warmth. It seemed that the ice cubes in his arms for more than half a year finally melted. Was Li finally willing to let go of the hatred? Or did he think too much? The mentality of worrying about gains and losses reappeared. Hearing the footsteps, Ling Li suddenly woke up. He looked up and saw that Su Li was not at the door. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. The hatred of killing relatives was not so easy to resolve. But now at least he saw hope. Why did Li vomit blood for no reason? When I healed her, there was nothing serious in her body. It seemed that she just fainted because of the intense emotion. But now everything is peaceful. What could stimulate Li to vomit blood? After thinking for a while, Ling Li had many doubts. But as before, he couldn't get the answer. He could only put everything in his heart and wait for Su Li to change her mind. Dispelling the thoughts in his mind, Ling Li shook his head slightly. He got up and went to the outer room of the study. His eyes suddenly fixed on the teacup on the table. Now, Chiu Meng wouldn't come to the east courtyard for a surprise inspection. Then this cup of tea. Chapter 283. Unconsciously it was getting late. "Miss, Master, time to eat." Mammy Li wiped the water on her hands and opened the door to greet them. Recently, the industry of the Ling family gradually entered the peak season. Chiu Meng was so busy that she had no time to eat at home. Ling Li didn't need to go to the main courtyard to accompany her. For the convenience of going in and out, Mammy Li was in charge of the meal. After Ling Li heard it, before he had time to respond, he saw Ling Qinglan coming in hurriedly with a dignified face. Ling Li looked slightly serious and immediately said, "Mammy, tell Li that I have something important to do and can't eat for a while." Mammy Li had been a servant for decades, so she was good at observing people's expressions. She immediately nodded and turned away. Ling Qinglan was slightly surprised when he heard that Ling Li called her again. But at this moment he had no time to care about it. He said very quickly, "I cooperated with Chen Gong to investigate the mummy case thoroughly and finally found the whereabouts of the murderer." "Found?" Ling Li was suddenly shocked and said without hesitation, "Take the elites and let's go immediately." "You also go?" Ling Qinglan hesitated and glanced at the direction of the wing room. "Although Gushin is not far from Yunjing, it will take a few days to come back." Ling Li smiled slightly and said, "Li is not an ordinary woman. If she didn't remind us, we couldn't find the murderers so quickly. Since the murderer is likely to practice the evil blood skill, he can't be resisted by ordinary people of the inborn realm. Instead of wasting the elites of Yunjing, it is better for me to go in person." Ling Qinglan nodded gently and said with envy, "You have a good wife." Ling Li was slightly stunned and immediately laughed at himself. Don't make fun of me. It's not too late. Let's go. Shortly after they left, Chiu Meng came back in a hurry and got the news. She was surprised for a long time and then she said with relief, I didn't expect that the boy could also think of helping Qinglan. The old mammy beside her smiled and said, Madam, since the young master got married, he has never fooled around. Now he wants to do business. He must have completely changed his bad habits. Chiu Meng nodded with a smile and said, Good. Thanks to Li, I don't feel ashamed to face the ancestors of the Ling family. 2 days passed in a flash. Su Li practiced quietly in the east courtyard alone. She was very comfortable. During this period, Chiu Meng came to see her once. Seeing that Su Li was not angry because Ling Li suddenly went out, she was relieved. On the 3rd day, in the quiet study, Su Li sat cross-legged on the soft couch and suddenly woke up from meditation. Her eyelashes trembled and she suddenly opened her eyes. What's going on? Why am I so distracted that I can't even maintain my meditative state? Su Li frowned and muttered to herself. She had reached the longevity realm, so she could sense the coming disaster. Disaster. Ling Li. Yun Yi, who was guarding at the door, immediately came in. Ling Imo had received the secret report yesterday and went to Nanjiang. Now, except for Su Li, there was only Yun Yi who stayed in the Ling mansion. With the support of Su Li, the cultivation of the 10 guards of the Yunj sect had a breakthrough. Among them, Yun Yi had the greatest improvement. He had been with Su Li all the time. What he saw and heard was a profound pneuma. Now he was a senior in the inborn 8th hurdle, which was not inferior to Ling Imo. What can I do for you, miss? Do you know where Ling Li went a few days ago? Su Li said directly. Yun Yi was slightly stunned and immediately tried to recall. After a while, he said uncertainly, Child's place seems to be called Lonely Mountain, but I don't know where it is. Su Li's eyes flashed and she immediately interrupted, Lonely Mountain in the north of Yunjing City. Prepare a horse that can travel thousands of miles a day for me. Right now. Yun Yi looked slightly serious and said, Miss, I will go with you. Su Li frowned slightly and said, You have to stay to cover for me. Don't be discovered by the Ling family during my absence. Just in case, I will ask In Xuedong to come over. You should cooperate with me and put on a good show. Miss, Yun Yi looked embarrassed. His primary task was to protect Su Li, but now Su Li had to take risks alone. I have made up my mind. You don't have to say more. Su Li was expressionless. She waved her sleeves and made a decision. She said lightly, Besides, if I can't explode myself with my cultivation, you can't protect me. Yun Yi didn't say anything and turned around to execute the order. In reality, his improvement in the past 6 months was already very great, but compared to the miss, it was still insignificant. He felt very helpless. Ever since he became the Miss Guard, he seemed to have taken on more of the role of a follower. It was really too difficult to surpass the miss in terms of cultivation. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, a man in white with a bamboo hat left Yunjing City on a horse. There were countless people in Jianghu who dressed like this every day. Naturally, this scene didn't cause any disturbance. Lonely Mountain. This lonely mountain towered into the clouds, and the top could not be seen. No other mountain could have such an amazing height, so it was named Lonely Mountain by idlers who came to see it. At this moment, the top of Lonely Mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist, and a strong smell of blood permeated it. Looking closer, it was faintly seen that 2 sides of people confronted each other. One side had only 1 person, while the other side had dozens of people. But it was unknown why such a huge gap in numbers still made the side with more people dare not to take action. In the surroundings, it could be seen that there were more than 20 corpses lying on the ground. Among them, people dressed in the Supreme Judiciary's clothes accounted for 80%. It could be imagined what kind of fierce fighting had happened here in the past 2 days. Seeing this, there was no need to guess the identity of most people. It was Ling Li and Ling Qinglan. At this moment, Ling Qinglan's state was not very good. The clothes of the officer of the Supreme Judiciary were tattered and stained with blood. His face was even more terrible because of excessive blood loss. I was careless. Ling Li looked dignified. Although his state was much better than Ling Qinglan's, the genuine energy in his body was less than 20%, and his strength declined greatly. On the contrary, the man in a bloody robe with disheveled hair was full of vigor and violent. Although his mind seemed to be affected by the evil martial arts, his strength was not weakened at all. Ha 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 ha. The man's eyes flashed with red light, and he laughed wildly. He stared at Ling Qinglan with a ferocious expression. I remember you. You ruined my family and made me go on this road of no return. Now I become like this, which is neither human nor ghost, thanks to you. And you. In the middle of speaking, the man suddenly pointed to Ling Li. You are with him. If you dare to stop me from taking revenge, all of you will die. Ahem. Ling Qinglan's mouth was bleeding, and his injury was getting worse, but his expression didn't change. He said coldly, Lin Yanxing, the Lin family really deserved what happened in those days. The supreme judiciary is just impartial. You still have time to turn back? A bunch of nonsense. Hearing Ling Qinglan call his name, the man in the red robe immediately went crazy. How dare you call my name? Ling Qinglan was silent. He had achieved his goal, and he couldn't continue to stimulate Lin Yanxing. I was the first genius in the Qinghe town at that time. How glorious it was! If you didn't intervene, I would have been successful and famous and entered the National Academy. Ha ha ha, it's destiny. Ling Qinglan, you didn't expect that I would have a change of fortune, right? Speaking of this, the man in the red robe seemed to notice something. He looked at Ling Li and grinned gloomily. I see. You are stalling for time. I won't let you get what you want. Before he finished his words, he rushed out and turned into a bloody shadow. His right hand was like a claw, and he grabbed Ling Li. Oh no! Ling Li's face changed. In the blink of an eye, he retreated for dozens of feet and got out of the attack range. The man in the red robe couldn't catch up with him, but he did something on the way. The claw suddenly accelerated extremely strangely and grabbed Ling Li's chest. Ling Li couldn't avoid it, so he had to snort and fight with his fists. Boom! The powerful impact turned into a visible wave and spread. For a moment, the sand and stones splashed like a terrible tornado. Puff puff puff. Several disciples of the Yinma cult with low cultivation vomited blood and flew backward. Even Ling Qinglan was shaken and his pneuma was even weaker. Bang! Bang! Two loud noises sounded. The two figures, one red and one black, finally separated. The man in the red robe retreated 5 steps, but Ling Li retreated dozens of steps before he could stop. As soon as he stood still, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, and his pneuma weakened at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was seriously injured. He was seriously injured with just one blow. After this man absorbed the blood of others, he became stronger. You can still escape. Then I'll give you another claw. Go to hell. Go to hell. Go to hell. Lin Yanxing laughed and rushed up. Although his mouth was also bleeding, his injury was much lighter than Ling Li's. Fortunately, it seemed that he couldn't use his speed for the time being, so Ling Li had a chance to breathe. While using his body movement, Ling Li quickly calmed down his pneuma and blood and thought about countermeasures. But at this moment, he suddenly heard Ling Qinglan's exclamation. Be careful! Lin Yanxing's steel-like hard nails on his right hand extended for a few inches in the blink of an eye. It was the distance of a few inches that made Ling Li's dodging body movement become useless. Ling Li's pupils shrank suddenly. He was about to speed up regardless of his injury, but Lin Yanxing's speed was strangely accelerated again. The nails like a knife went straight to Ling Li's neck. Oh no! Ling Li's face finally changed dramatically. The skin on his neck could feel the cold sharpness. In the next moment, his neck would be cut and he would die on the spot. Ling Li! Ling Qinglan roared. He gathered all his strength and threw countless hidden weapons to the back of Lin Yanxing. But Lin Yanxing didn't mean to dodge at all. His eyes were full of red light, and he shouted crazily. Ha! Go to hell! At this critical moment, a white figure climbed to the top of the mountain. It crossed a distance of dozens of feet in one step and appeared between Ling Li and Lin Yanqing. A white hand gently grasped Lin Yanqing's claw. Ling Qinglan was almost stunned, and the white figure said something very familiar to him. Chapter 284. Lin Yanqing only felt that his right hand was tightly gripped by Su Li. His bones made a sound of being overwhelmed. He was almost about to be crushed in the next moment. What was more terrible was that Su Li's other hand had already pressed to his chest like lightning. The landslide and tsunami made him suffocate. How could it be possible? His bones were tempered by the treasure and were tougher than the sword. How could he be so weak in the hands of this person? He couldn't compete with her. He couldn't defeat her. Lin Yanqing's heart was full of fear. At the critical moment, he showed a ferocious look and scratched his right hand without hesitation. His right hand was immediately cut off from his wrist. Taking this opportunity, he retreated without hesitation. He instantly turned into a rainbow shadow and was about to escape. At the same time, a roar with unforgettable hatred resounded through the mountain top. No matter who you are, break one of my arms. When I succeed, you will be the first one to be killed. Su Li narrowed her eyes and showed a sense of mockery. Want to leave? She stepped out, and the ripples under her feet reverberated. Her figure suddenly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already at the top of the mountain. Compared with Lin Yanqing, she was much faster at such a strange and horrible speed. Ah! A scream came from a distance, mixed with a strong panic. Who are you? Why do you meddle in my business? Ling Li didn't come to himself until he heard the scream. He took a deep breath and swallowed the blood in his throat. All of this happened in a flash. He was still between life and death in the last breath. The next breath, with the arrival of Mr. Li, the situation of the two sides was instantly reversed. Ling Li, are you okay? Ling Qinglan dragged his seriously injured body and walked slowly to Ling Li. Ling Li shook his head. I won't die. Ling Qinglan couldn't help but smile bitterly. We were almost doomed. If we really died here, the Ling family would be in danger. Ling Li was silent, but there was a trace of fear in his heart. Those elders of the Yinma cult were not good people. Now they just thought that he had the potential to revive the Yinma cult. If he really died, they would never care about the Ling family. Fortunately, Mr. Li came. Ling Qinglan breathed a sigh of relief. He took out an elixir and began to heal himself. He couldn't help but sigh. Mr. Li has been practicing in seclusion for more than half a year. It seems that the people of the Lin Li building also practiced with him and disappeared. I didn't expect that he would appear in time to save me. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a miracle. Ling Li was silent and nodded slowly after a while. He knew that Mr. Li's cultivation had surpassed him and reached the longevity realm. Although he did not feel that his aptitude was the best in the world, it did not feel good to be surpassed by others. Moreover, this person had always been regarded as his love rival. While they were talking, Su Li returned with Lin Yanqing, who was dying. Her white clothes were still spotless. It could be seen that the battle was not difficult. However, Su Li was a little uneasy under the bamboo hat at this moment. Lin Yanqing didn't practice the bloody evil skill, but because, Mr. Li, are you okay? Ling Qinglan's words interrupted her recollection. Su Li came to her sense and immediately nodded. I'm fine. This person's practice has been abolished by me. He is no longer a threat. Lord Ling can close the case. That's really great. Thanks to Mr. Li's timely rescue, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Ling Qinglan couldn't help showing his joy. In the past half-month, Dongfang Shao almost wanted to kill him. He was really under great pressure. Hearing Ling Qinglan's words, no matter how uncomfortable Ling Li was, he knew that he really owed Mr. Li his life for this action. He immediately clenched his fists and said dryly, "Thank you." Su Li nodded slightly and accepted his gratitude. But soon Ling Li heard the ridicule. I didn't expect that Hierarchling would also thank me. I'm really flattered. Ling Li's face immediately darkened. He transmitted the sound regardless of his serious injury. The relationship between you and me is not good. but it is not to the point of hostility. Since you can come to save me, everything in the past will naturally be written off. Ho ho, right off. What if I say that the message was sent to me by Su Li? Su Li suddenly said, but Ling Li smiled slightly and retorted confidently, Li's words and deeds these days have all been noticed by me. She has lost contact with you. How could she send a message to you in time? Su Li looked at Ling Li, who pretended to be calm and couldn't help laughing in her heart. As Ling Li, she didn't care about him and couldn't care about him. Unexpectedly, he was full of nonsense outside and flattered himself. She had to say that he was childish and cute. Thinking of this, Su Li no longer teased him. She followed Ling Li's meaning and said with a smile, I didn't expect that Hierarch Ling and his wife loved each other so much. The message was not sent to me by Su Li. The Lin Li building naturally has its own source of information. I saved you because I didn't want Su Li to be sad. Besides, I did my best to help you. I hope you can understand. Of course I understand. How dare Ling Li demand more? Ling Qinglan, who stood aside, saw them flirting with each other. If he didn't know that they were secretly transmitting the sound to each other, he would think that they were infected with strange hobbies. After a fight, it was getting late. Ling Qinglan recovered a little and immediately commanded others to clean up the battlefield and prepare to go down the mountain. Although Ling Li was seriously injured, he had reached the peak of the inborn realm after all. After healing for a while, his injury had been stabilized and wouldn't affect his action. He glanced at Mr. Li, who was standing in front of him and seemed to protect him. He felt strange. He always had a doubt. Why did Mr. Li save the Ling family? This time he had Su Li as an excuse. But the last assassination in the hunting ground showed that the relationship between Su Li and him was not close. When Ling Li organized his words and wanted to ask, Su Li said first, I think Hierarch Ling is only one step away from the longevity realm. Here is an elixir. It must be of some use to you. Su Li turned her palm and a jade-like elixir appeared in her hand. A strong smell of medicine spread. I prepared this elixir for myself. Now that I have broken through, the elixir is of no use. It's better to help you achieve your goal. Ling Li was slightly stunned and then surprised. Just by smelling the fragrance, he knew that this thing was precious. If he took it, he could definitely reach the longevity realm within half a month. But how could he afford such a treasure with the relationship between him and Mr. Li? Mr. Li, forgive me for my rudeness. But why don't you give such a precious elixir to someone with more potential in the Lin Li building? Ling Li asked in confusion. Su Li slightly paused and sighed in her heart. She was too impatient. But she didn't have much time. After the confrontation with Lin Yanxing, she understood it more. Although the elixir is precious, I can refine the first one. Naturally, I can refine the second one. And now there is no younger generation in the Lin Li building who is stuck at the peak of the inborn realm. If I can use words to exchange for your friendship, why not? Maybe the Lin Li building will need your help in the future. Su Li's reason was a little far-fetched, but Ling Li didn't think for a long time. He took the elixir with a smile and said, Mr. Li, you really like to joke. You are in the Lin Li building. Why do you need my help? However, if the Lin Li building is in danger one day, I will definitely help you. He noticed the doubtful point in the words of Mr. Li, but his situation didn't allow him to think more. The pressure from all sides almost made him breathless. He was more eager to break through the longevity realm than anyone else. Only by breaking through could he really control the power of the Yinma cult and have the capital to compete with the royal family. On the same day, the news that the murderer of the murder case was arrested spread throughout the capital, but it had nothing to do with Su Li. She didn't hesitate to use the bodily movement to return to the Ling mansion in advance. But she got the news that Ling Qinglan and Ling Li went to the imperial palace to receive the reward. Fortunately, it was not completely useless to try to come back. At least, Qiu Meng came to tell her the good news that Ling Li solved the case. She didn't reveal any flaw. Dongfang Xiao should not know Ling Li's real identity. This trip to the imperial palace should be daunting but not dangerous. But we can't take it lightly. Su Li murmured with her eyes shining. If the secret was really exposed, no matter what was hidden in the imperial palace, she must take action. There was no hatred in her heart because Su Yu should still be living well in the outside world. Whether Su Yu still remembered her or not, she had no regrets. While waiting, Su Li didn't meditate. She couldn't help but think of the strange scene when she chased Lin Yanxing in the daytime. Under the pressure of her strength, although Lin Yanxing's martial arts were strange, he couldn't escape. He was beaten half to death by only one palm. But Lin Yanxing was like an immortal cockroach. No matter how serious the injury was, he could recover in an instant. Even the claws that were cut off by him before grew back. Helplessly, she had to kill him again and again. As the number of recoveries increased, Lin Yanxing became more and more blurred. Finally, he took out something from his heart. It was a crystal-clear blood-colored bead. The bead of blood left his body and immediately turned into an extreme red light rushing into her body. The speed was beyond the range of her reaction. She couldn't stop it even if she wanted to. Almost instantly, a desire for blood emerged from the bottom of her heart, as if falling into the boundless sea of blood. She immediately wanted to force the bead of blood out of her body. But as soon as she thought of it, the feeling of the bead of blood completely disappeared. Even the desire for blood dissipated. It seemed that it was suppressed by something and didn't show up. Seeing this scene, Lin Yanxing immediately became crazier. He shouted inarticulately and repeated it many times before Su Li could understand the meaning. Impossible! I'm his successor. How could it choose you? Impossible! Old guy, you lied to me. Sitting quietly in the room, Su Li touched the position of her heart. Her eyes were gloomy. Was the old guy mentioned by Lin Yanxing the old beggar? Most of the day had passed, but the bead of blood had no reaction. Was it related to the black ring? Or there was something strange in her body that she didn't notice at all? Well, it's useless to think too much. Chapter 285. In the evening, Ling Li and Ling Qinglan finally came back from the palace. Behind them, there was a team of guards carrying boxes. It was obviously the gold, silver, and jewelry rewarded by Dongfang Xiao. Entering the palace to meet the emperor and getting a reward was a happy thing for the Ling family. Qiu Meng inevitably arranged a family banquet in the evening. It was quite lively. The only thing that made Qiu Meng feel regretful was that Ling Ping was still supervising the war in the frontier and couldn't come back to reunite. And don't worry. The second brother is a good man. He has been to the battlefield many times over the years, but he is still fine. Now he is the marshal. He doesn't need to fight by himself in the war. It is naturally safer. After Ling Qinglan comforted her, Qiu Meng was relieved. After the case was closed and the pressure of the Ling family was relieved, he could spare energy to pay attention to the war. Ling Imo had arrived at the frontier. Regardless of the outcome of the war, it was absolutely no problem to protect Ling Ping. At this time, Mrs. Gu, who had been silent, slowly said, "Qinglan, don't put too much pressure on yourself. The Ling family is not as fragile as you think. It is not a problem for me to hold on for a few more years." "Mother, now our family is fine. There is no danger." "What are you talking about?" Qiu Meng couldn't help but say. Mrs. Gu smiled and sighed in her heart. Qiu Meng. She liked this girl because she was simple-minded and wouldn't bully the honest Ling Feng. But because of this, she couldn't see the dangerous situation of the Ling family. Qinglan made such a great contribution, but Dongfang Xiao only rewarded him with some useless gold, silver, and jewelry. He didn't even mention the promotion. How could it not explain the problem? It was a pity that only Ling Ping and Ling Qinglan could see this in the Ling family. Except for the old guy, only Ling Ping and Ling Qinglan could see this. As for Ling, Mrs. Gu glanced at Ling Power, who was still secretly flirting with Su Li. She felt helpless and nodded. "Well, I won't say it. In short, Qinglan, do what you can and don't take risks." "I will." Ling Qinglan nodded slightly. After the conversation, the family banquet finally came to an end with a relatively relaxed tone. After the meal, everyone rested. Ling Li returned to the east courtyard. Looking at Ling Li, who looked indifferent, he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, he didn't ask anything. He just said, "I will sleep in the study tonight." Then he turned the wheelchair and left. Looking at his back, Su Li's eyes gradually softened, and then mixed with a lot of unwillingness and unknown emotions. Finally, all kinds of complex feelings turned into coldness and firmness. Ling Li should be refining the elixir she gave him. Of course, she didn't prepare this elixir for herself, but for Ling Li. The elixir contained nothing else but her 500 years of cultivation. If Ling Li could absorb 50% of that pure power, not only could he break through the longevity realm, but he could also quickly reach the peak of the first hurdle of the longevity realm. The battle in Lonely Mountain was not difficult. It only took me 30 years of accumulation, and the other 20 years of accumulation were all wasted on the road. Su Li sat in front of the dressing table and quietly looked at the person in the mirror. To be exact, she was looking at the new red jade and gold hairpin on her head. Ling Li secretly gave it to her at the family dinner just now. 50 years of accumulation isn't a lot to make a move once. Su Li took off the hairpin on her head and gently rubbed it. The consumption of accumulation after sealing my cultivation is less than I thought. But can I really accompany him like this all the time? Really, can I? Suddenly, the window of the side door of the wing room was suddenly opened, and a figure quietly appeared behind Su Li. He said respectfully, "Highly great master." Su Li slowly turned around and saw the person. It was Chu Xiao. She nodded expressionlessly. "Did Jing Xen ask you to come? And why do you call me highly great master?" Chu Xiao didn't dare to be disrespectful. He bent down and presented a square wooden box with both hands, and then said, "Highly great master has announced that you are the master, and the 12 heads of the spiritual realm dare not disobey. Now the spiritual realm is gathering troops and waiting for your order at any time." Su Li took the wooden box, but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she said, "Jing Xen is Jing Xen, and I am me. If you don't agree, you can tell me. You don't have to compromise." Chu Xiao was immediately frightened and said, "Highly great master, you misunderstood me. We 12 heads of the spiritual realm are willing to go through fire and water for you. We don't feel wronged at all. Highly great master, please understand." Su Li frowned slightly. She didn't understand why Chu Xiao was so loyal to the spiritual realm. But it was good. You go outside and guard. Don't be found by the people in the mansion. If there is any trouble, remind me immediately. After Chu Xiao left, Su Li opened the wooden box. Immediately, a light flew out from the gap and turned into an illusory figure. It was Jing Xen. Sub-awareness. This was a sub-awareness. This word naturally crossed Su Li's mind. She wanted to recall more deeply, but found that it was a blank and she couldn't remember more. Fortunately, at this time, Jing Xen explained, "Master, this time the spiritual body sent by the outside world is very powerful. I can't fight with it. After many days, I found a gap and separated a consciousness from the body. Although it doesn't have any fighting capacity and can't last for a long time, it is enough to communicate with you." As she said, she pointed to the transparent master in the wooden box. "This is the soul sealing pearl. The original soul of Mei Ruhan is in it. After dealing with the spiritual body, I personally went to explore it. I found that an incredible change happened to Mei Ruhan. She had 2 souls in her body. One soul belongs to the body, and the other one was produced when she entered the reincarnation mirror." "What do you mean?" Su Li frowned. She hadn't recovered her memory, so she couldn't understand Jing Xen's words at all. Jing Xen had no choice but to continue to explain patiently, "Master, no matter a practitioner or an ordinary person, there can only be one soul in a physical body. There is no doubt about it." Su Li understood and her eyes flickered slightly. "So, after Mei Ruhan's new soul woke up and had its own consciousness, it stimulated the original soul and woke it up?" Jing Xen was full of regret. When the old soul woke up, it naturally recovered all the original memory, so it tricked you to break the ring. Unfortunately, the spiritual body in the outside world suddenly lost its mind and went crazy. At that time, in order not to offend those sects in the outside world, It took me a lot of effort to suppress it. Now I think it was all their conspiracy to distract my attention. If I had noticed it earlier, maybe you... Forget it. Don't mention the things that have happened. Su Li waved her hand to stop Jing Xian from continuing. She fixed her eyes on the soul-sealing pearl for a long time and suddenly said, Jing Xian, since you are the mirror spirit of the reincarnation mirror, the illusion should also be under your control. Can you directly destroy the royal family of the Dahan country? Jing Xian smiled bitterly. Master, you think too highly of me. Not to mention that I am not the real mirror spirit of the reincarnation mirror. The Dongfang family is not as simple as you think. They have a very close relationship with Shaoshan Palace. Shaoshan Palace? Su Li was slightly confused, and her face changed immediately. She blurted out, the overlord sect of the spiritual circle, Shaoshan Palace? Master, you're right. It is that Shaoshan Palace. The history of Shaoshan Palace is very long. It is said that there is an old ancestor of the divine realm in the palace. Even I may not be their opponent. Su Li held her breath. The divine realm. She had never heard of this word. It must be the realm above the longevity realm. There were 9 hurdles in the longevity realm, and the difference in strength of each hurdle couldn't be calculated. But the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace actually surpassed the longevity realm. There is one more point. I have long wanted to tell you, but I didn't have enough time last time. So, I can explain to you face to face now. Su Li nodded to show her understanding. It's not too late to say it now. Jing Xian showed a helpless expression. I told you last time that I had no choice but to sacrifice myself to enter the reincarnation mirror. Although it was a blessing in disguise and I became a mirror spirit with an endless life, I knew that there was an extremely horrible existence sleeping in the reincarnation mirror the moment I became a mirror spirit. That existence is the real mirror spirit. It may just be an agent chosen by it unconsciously. Su Li was slightly shocked. Jing Xian was just an agent. No wonder she couldn't completely control this treasure. Master, the illusion you are in is actually not a complete illusion. Strictly speaking, there are 3 kinds of people living in the illusion now. 3 kinds? Su Li was slightly stunned. In addition to the group of outsiders, there were actually 2 kinds of people? Jing Xian nodded cautiously. The first kind is an outsider like you, who just entered in the last 100 years. The second kind is the intelligence that is born from the illusion. Take Chu Xiao as an example. Strictly speaking, they are not human beings. Su Li glanced at Chu Xiao, who was still waiting respectfully outside the door. He didn't look like other species. Because the existence like Chu Xiao is transformed by the illusion, so as long as the illusion exists, they can get eternal life. Even if they are killed, it will take some time to condense again. However, the recondensed wisdom will not have the original memory, which is convenient for me to brainwash and control. At this point, Su Li finally understood where Chu Xiao's loyalty came from. A blank piece of paper was the easiest to brainwash. What about the third kind of people? Su Li asked again. Jing Xian's face instantly became serious, and her tone became low. The last type is the ancient existences that were trapped in this illusory realm a very, very long time ago. Even though they're trapped, they aren't controlled by the illusory realm of reincarnation. No matter how many lives the illusory realm reincarnates, they're able to transcend it and live freely without revealing themselves. Su Li was slightly nervous and immediately thought of the old beggar. The illusion that she felt from him couldn't integrate into the world was exactly what Jing Xian said. My ability is limited. I don't know how many of those existences are in the illusion and how powerful they are. The only one I can find out is the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace. Jing Xian shook her head and said. Her figure became blurred and soon dissipated. But this time, she was obviously not in a hurry. She had said what she should say, and the rest was up to her master. Master, I left a secret method in the wooden box. If you can master it, maybe... Chapter 286. The night was still quiet. After Chu Xiao left, Su Li sat back in front of the table and picked up a secret method in the wooden box to read it carefully. After the ring was broken, her comprehension was not the same as before. Only after an hour, she had a kind of enlightenment in her heart. This was the secret method to control the power of illusion. If she could master it, she could at least use the power of illusion to raise her strength to another level. Maybe after I master it, I can fight against the old ancestor of Shenshao Palace, Su Li muttered to herself. She could guess the content of Jing Xian's words after she understood the secret method. But on the contrary, using the secret method to improve strength in a short time consumed a lot of foundation. If she was right, she still had more than 9,000 foundation, but how many times could she fight if she really broke out her strongest fighting power? Taking a breath, Su Li slowly immersed herself in the understanding. Even if she could only fight once, she would not hesitate when it was really necessary. After many days, Su Li concentrated on practicing the secret method, and Ling Li also tried his best to absorb the efficacy of elixirs. Finally, on the 8th day, an extremely horrible pneuma rose in the study of the east courtyard, which was covered by the tactical matrix. It almost broke through the tactical matrix and rushed to the sky. Su Li, who was in the wing room, sensed it. She immediately stretched out her hand and pressed in the air. The pneuma that was about to break through the tactical matrix immediately disappeared. Only 8 days. It's much faster. Su Li smiled slightly. Ling Li's talent was better than she thought. He was so talented in the illusion. What about the original him? Thinking of this, Su Li's eyes dimmed slightly, and she meditated again. At this moment, the commotion in the study gradually became smaller and finally disappeared into nothingness. Looking at the files in the room that were in a mess because of the impact of the spiritual power, Ling Li shook his head and smiled bitterly. But he was happy in his heart. He stayed at the peak of the inborn realm for a year, and he finally broke through to the longevity realm. As long as the news was passed to the elders of the cult, he could immediately control all the power of the Yinma cult. In this way, even if the Dongfang family really fell out with the Ling family, I will not be afraid. Ling Li clenched his fists. After stabilizing his mind, he sat down again to consolidate the realm that he had just broken through. If the power leaked and was exposed in advance, the loss outweighed the gain. The next morning, Ling Qinglan came in a hurry. When he saw Ling Li with a smile, he faintly felt something different. Then he suddenly thought of something. He was stunned and said with great joy, "Have you broken through?" Ling Li nodded with a smile. "Great." Ling Qinglan was refreshed, and then his face darkened. He said hurriedly, "Let's not talk about this first. Something happened in the battlefield of Nanjiang border. Second brother fell into the trap of Nanjiang country and disappeared. Ling Mo also disappeared." What? Ling Li's face changed slightly. He waved his hand and the mechanism of the study was activated. The tunnel appeared. According to Ling Mo's temperament, if he successfully got out of trouble, there would be some news. "There's no time to lose, I'll set off immediately. Help me cover up my mother and Su Li." Ling Li hesitated for a moment and said, "Just say that I am going out to do something and will be back soon." Ling Qinglan nodded. After Ling Li left, he was slightly relieved. Ling Li was already in the longevity realm. The ordinary army could not be his opponent. There were only a few people in the longevity realm in the secular world. As long as Ling Li could arrive in time, the crisis would definitely be resolved. Ling Qinglan tidied up the study and went out to the wing room. He knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. He scanned the room with his psychic awareness and found that there was no one in the room. Where can Su Li go in the morning? Ling Li was confused and was about to open the door directly. Mammy Li suddenly appeared with a note in her hand and handed it to him. "Master Qinglan, Miss asked me to give this to you." Ling Qinglan took the note and opened it quickly. After reading it, he smiled helplessly. "Well, it's easy to make up a reason after Su Li leaves." The handwriting on the note was very sloppy, and there was only one line. It could be seen that the owner wrote it in a hurry. "Don't worry about leaving for a few days." Crack. Ling Qinglan crushed the note and turned to leave. He had to think of a better reason to tell Qiumeng that Su Li disappeared not long after Ling Li left. If there was no explanation, he would not believe it. However, it's good for Su Li to follow him. With her medical skills, she can help a lot on the battlefield. Ling Li is obsessed with getting into a dead end. I didn't expect that Su Li's idea was really broken by him. 7 days later, outside the Dahan Pass. The land was purple, the grass and trees were red, and everything was withering. Sporadic fires of war could be seen everywhere. Broken fences, broken walls, and mountains of corpses could be seen. There was even a faint blood mist in some places where the war had just ended. Suddenly, a white figure flitted across the battlefield like a ghost. When the edge of the battlefield was about to enter the withered forest, the white light dissipated and a white figure appeared. It was Ling Li, who wore the mask of Child Li. According to Ling Qinglan's information, the last place where the second brother was attacked is here. Ling Li frowned and reached out to brush the air. He turned his palm, and there was a cloud of strange white smoke slowly rolling. Smoke miasma? It's the method of the Hehuan sect. Is it possible that the ambush is not from the Nanjiang country, but from the Hehuan sect? But why does the Hehuan sect attack the second brother? There is no reason. With a trace of doubt, Ling Li stepped into the withered forest. If he was in the inborn realm, he would be afraid of it. Now, even if he breathed freely, he would not be affected at all. At the same time, a faint light suddenly burst out in a very inconspicuous cave in the depths of the withered forest, which isolated the bloody smell from the outside world. The lieutenant who put the last tactical flag finally couldn't hold it anymore. He directly collapsed on the ground and gasped heavily. He said reluctantly, "General, the tactical matrix has been set up. We are safe for the time being." Glancing at the lieutenant, who was covered with scars, Ling Ping nodded gently and ordered him to meditate and heal. He glanced at the other lieutenants who escaped with him, and finally turned his eyes to Ling Mo, who was in a coma. At this moment, Ling Mo's black clothes were tattered and blood-stained. There was no good flesh on his body. In particular, his right elbow and left thighs seemed to be cut off by a sharp weapon. The white bone was exposed, which was shocking. His breathing was even more undetectable. If Ling Ping didn't have good hearing, he would even think that he was dead. Ling Ping barely checked Ling Mo's heart pulse and found that it was neither weakened nor strengthened. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He had used all the medicines that could be used on Ling Mo. Whether Ling Mo could survive or not depended on fate. "It turns out that you have always protected me." Ling Ping's eyes were complicated. He slowly breathed out, as if he wanted to spit out all kinds of thoughts in his mind. The battle 7 days ago was the final battle that determined the outcome of this war. No matter in terms of military strength or intelligence control, he was above the Nanjiang country. There was no reason for him to be defeated. Sure enough, after a fierce battle, the Nanjiang country was defeated. Even the enemy's marshal abandoned the camp and fled. Ling Ping made up his mind to catch the king. Naturally, he couldn't let him escape. He immediately chased after him with his elite troops. So, they came to the withered forest. Of course, he understood the principle of not entering the forest. At that time, he wanted to retreat with his people. But he didn't expect that the ambush was set outside the withered forest, and there were only 4 people in the ambush. But these 4 people killed Ling Ping's elite troops. They were not their opponents at all. The peak of the inborn realm. The 4 killers were all at the peak of the inborn realm. Ling Ping himself had the cultivation of the inborn second hurdle. He had seen the existence of the peak of the inborn realm, an old man beside Dongfang Xiao. In front of him, he felt the same pneuma. Despair. Which martial artist at the peak of the innate realm wasn't a big shot in their own right? He never thought that one day, for people at the peak of the inborn realm would take action to kill him. Just at the moment when he was about to give up, another sword light suddenly lit up in the forest. The sword light was really amazing and beautiful. The angle was perfect and impeccable. It didn't give people any time to react. Even the people at the peak of the inborn realm were seriously injured and lost the ability to fight for a short time. Then, 2 more figures appeared in the forest. The three figures immediately fought with the remaining three people at the peak of the inborn realm. In an instant, the sky was full of knives and swords. Unfortunately, the cultivation of the other two black figures was poor after all. They would soon be defeated. Ling Ping wanted to help, but he also knew that he would only make trouble in the battle of that level. Just when Ling Ping tried to see the situation clearly, the two figures suddenly stopped, and then there was only white light in front of them. Boom! Boom! An explosion sounded in his ears. Accompanied by the hoarse voice of the six shirts, the battle came to an end in an extremely tragic manner. The two people in the black shadows had actually risked their lives to self-destruct and forcefully perish together with the four-peak innate realm experts. That was the self-explosion of two inborn seniors. Inborn seniors cherished their lives very much. Ling Ping was very clear that the two people didn't explode themselves for him, but for the man in black who had lost consciousness and ran away. Thinking of this, he was more and more curious about the identity of the man in black. He always wanted to know who protected him secretly, but he also knew that it was not safe at that time. When he came to this cave, he knew the true face of the man in black. It was Ling Mo who had always been with the third brother. Ling Mo actually had the cultivation to fight with the people at the peak of the inborn realm. He hid so deeply in the Ling family. Was it for repaying the third brother's kindness, or all this was arranged by the third brother? Third brother, if I can go back alive. Ling Ping took a deep breath and barely suppressed the throbbing in his heart. He sat down and ran the genuine energy to heal himself. Suddenly, Ling Ping noticed something wrong. He suddenly opened his eyes and was shocked to find that Ling Mo actually sat up by himself and was healing himself. With such an injury, could he wake up by himself? How strong his willpower was. At least, it was completely impossible for him. It seemed that Ling Mo sensed Ling Ping's sight. He opened his eyes with difficulty and said in a hoarse voice, "Master, it's coming." Ling Ping held his breath and said, "What did you say?" Third brother, what could a disabled man do on the battlefield? Chapter 287. Is it possible that he has other powerful helpers like you in secret and brought him here? How can his body stand it? Ling Ping frowned and asked, but Ling Mo was completely focused on healing and didn't respond. In desperation, Ling Ping could only temporarily suppress his messy thoughts and wait for Ling Mo to stabilize his injury. Just 2 days after Ling Li entered the withered forest, Su Li finally arrived at the border. It was a long journey, and Ling Li had rushed to the rescue in advance. Of course, she would not be so extravagant as to use her foundation to hurry. On the way, she used a spirit horse sent from the spiritual realm. Although it looked similar to ordinary horses, its speed was much faster than ordinary horses. It was 3 times faster than ordinary horses, so she could reach the border in just a few days. The spiritual realm was all over the illusion. As soon as Su Li arrived, someone appeared to take the horse and feed it. At the same time, a middle-aged executive wearing the symbolic clothes of the spiritual realm came forward respectfully. "Greetings, Lord. I'm Qing Sr." Su Li looked very young, even young. Qing Sen was old enough to be her uncle, but his age obviously didn't affect his respect for Su Li. He remembered the strict instructions of the great head of the spiritual realm and didn't dare to neglect. This was a person whose status was comparable to that of highly great master. If he didn't serve her well, he would definitely end up miserably. How is the situation in the border? Where is Ling Ping now? Su Li didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Qing Sen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately replied, "Sir. Since the order was passed to me, I immediately started to investigate. Half a month ago, General Ling Ping was ambushed by the Hahuan sect. After a battle, he was forced into the depths of the withered forest. I have marked the places where people might hide and sent people to explore. But the Hahuan sect and the royal family of Nanjiang country seem to be determined to kill Ling Ping. Most of the warriors in the withered forest were warriors of the inborn realm sent by them." Speaking of this, Qing Sen looked ashamed. Su Li reached the longevity realm and knew that what Qing Sen said was true. She immediately waved her sleeves and said, the two sects united. This is just a separate building. It's reasonable that you can't defeat them. Next, you don't need to send a lot of people into the withered forest. I will personally solve the problem. What you have to do next is to find out the relationship between the royal family of Nanjiang country and the Hehuan sect. What was it that caused these two families to unite? If she didn't figure it out, she wouldn't be able to rest easy. This subordinate will do it right away. Qing Sin bowed and immediately took people to execute the order. With the eyes of the spiritual realm all over the dreamland, what kind of news couldn't he get? The only variable that could be considered as a variable was the length of time. After Qing Sin left, no one else could be seen outside the withered forest. Su Li put away the map in her hand and glanced at the lonely woods. She triggered the mask in her body and faintly sensed the existence of the Yang Jade bone. She immediately chased after it. After running for half a day, Ling Li's figure finally appeared in Su Li's psychic awareness. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Ling Li had been wearing the mask on his face. If it was in his body, she would not be able to sense it. Ling Li, who was walking in the forest, stopped and looked more cautious. Although the peeping just came and went quickly, it did not prevent him from perceiving its existence. Do the seniors of the Hehuan sect arrive so soon? Ling Li frowned slightly, but the second brother's whereabouts have not been found. In the past 2 days, he had encountered no less than 4 groups of warriors of the Hehuan sect and the Nanjiang country. Although he killed them as soon as he met them, and the delay time was less than 5 minutes, it was difficult to ensure that the news had been leaked. The name, Child Li, was very deterrent, but he had many enemies, especially here was very close to the territory of the Lianshi cult. At this moment, phew! An extremely slight sound of breaking through the air sounded behind him. Ling Li squinted his eyes and immediately turned around to grab the hidden weapon. He didn't stop at all and rushed to the direction where the hidden weapon came from. But he didn't see the slightest figure. A senior is definitely above the longevity realm. His ability to hide his breath is very powerful. Ling Li judged the strength of the person and felt a little helpless. He just broke through the longevity realm not long ago. Maybe he could fight with others in terms of strength, but his body movement was still in the inborn realm. What is this? Ling Li had to turn his attention to the hidden weapon in his hand when he lost the trace of the enemy. Then he knew that the hidden weapon was not a hidden weapon at all, but a map made of very tough beast fur. What is drawn on the map is the withered forest. Ling Li was slightly shocked. The withered forest covered an area of more than 10,000 miles. Unexpectedly, there was a force that could draw such a detailed map. It was definitely not a overnight work. That person is not an enemy, but wants to give me a map. Thinking it through, Ling Li opened the map and looked at it carefully. Finally, he found the places that were marked. Is he helping me or setting a trap? Ling Li frowned tightly. A mysterious longevity realm suddenly appeared, gave him a map and left without saying a word. It was strange in any way. Well, let's go to the nearest place to have a look. Ling Li gritted his teeth and left. Now the second brother's life was uncertain. The situation was critical and he couldn't continue to delay. After Su Li gave the map to Ling Li, she returned to the spiritual realm and quickly led the spirit beast horse on the road again. This time, the direction was Nanjiang country. This trip was her decision after careful consideration. Ling Ping's matter happened suddenly. She just happened to meet him. Therefore, she chose not to show up and let Ling Li solve it by himself. Qing Sen had investigated clearly that there was no longevity realm on the border now. Of course, Ling Li's safety was not a problem. Su Li's clothes had been changed into the style of Nanjiang country. In addition, there were people of the spiritual realm to help her. 2 days later, she entered the territory of Nanjiang country without any difficulty. Only a few people knew Su Li's identity in the spiritual realm. Among them, Xian He, the head of the spiritual realm of Nanjiang country, was one of them. 6 days later, when she just set foot on the land of the capital of Nanjiang country, Xian He came to pick her up with people. After Su Li was placed in a luxurious yard, Xian He and Su Li were alone. He immediately knelt down and saluted, "Highly great master, I'm Xian He." Su Li responded calmly and said lightly, "You don't need to salute. I think Qing Sen has sent a message to you. How is the investigation going?" Xian He got up and immediately replied, "Nanjiang country and the Hahuan sect did collude together, but their original purpose was to deal with the Lianshi cult, not Ling Ping of the Ling family." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "What do you mean? Tell me in detail." "It is related to the auction in Yunjing, the capital of Dahan country, last year." Obviously, Xian He had done enough homework in the past 2 days. He almost knew the whole story. At that time, there should be a manipulator in Yunjing City. Almost all the foreign forces who went to Yunjing City for the auction suffered extremely heavy blows. I thought it was the Dongfang family who did it, but later I found that it was not. Well, skip this part and get to the point. Su Li interrupted him mercilessly. She was the initiator of the Great Purge. How could it be explained in detail by others? A trace of embarrassment flashed on Xian He's face and he continued, "Just half a month ago, the Lianshi cult released a very amazing news. The daughter of the lord of the Lianshi cult practiced the selfless corpse heart and almost perfectly inherited the most important practice method of the Lianshi cult. Her combat power was amazing. She could fight with a practitioner of the longevity realm at the peak of the inborn realm without being at a disadvantage. How could a practitioner of the inborn realm fight with a practitioner of the longevity realm without being at a disadvantage?" Su Li looked calm, but she couldn't help but feel horrified. Even she had never had this kind of combat power with a higher rank. Otherwise, she would not be forced into a desperate situation by an elder of the Yinma cult in the rain that day. However, after hearing this, Su Li had faintly understood that the Lianshi cult probably bid for the full moon and heartstrings for the proud girl. Unfortunately, the full moon and heartstrings had been replaced by her. If there was no accident, at this time, Xian He sighed, "I didn't expect that the young lord of the Lianshi cult was too anxious to refine the full moon and heartstrings." He exploded and died directly. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and didn't say much. Seeing that her reaction was indifferent, Xian He immediately put away the thought of seeing her reaction and continued to say honestly, "The lord of the Lianshi cult was old, and there was no successor in the cult. Now the sudden death of the young lord meant that the Lianshi cult had no way out. So, the lord of the Lianshi cult took a risky move and directly attacked the Nanjiang country." Su Li nodded slightly. There was no room for 2 tigers in the same mountain. The Wei family of the Nanjiang country and the Lianshi cult were like the Dongfang family of the Dahan royal family and the Yinma cult. One of them would inevitably decide the winner to control the country. The Wei family started a civil strife and sat on the throne for only a few years. The strength of the Wei family had not fully recovered. If they fought with the Lianshi cult at this time, they would definitely be badly hurt. So, they chose to cooperate with the Hahuan sect. Su Li took over the topic and said slowly. Xian He couldn't help but nod. Exactly. But the lord of the Lianshi cult was not a fool. He realized that the Wei family invited an ally. Although he hated them, he could only choose to give in. Speaking of this, Xian He smiled bitterly. The lord of the Lianshi cult was really courageous. He directly abandoned the sect and hid in the mystery forbidden area. The mystery forbidden area was not dangerous, but even a practitioner of the longevity realm would get lost in it. It was very likely that he couldn't come out in his lifetime. The Wei family and the Hahuan sect couldn't be crazy with him. Of course, they couldn't bring people to chase him. Hearing this, Su Li had fully understood that Ling Ping suffered an unexpected disaster. When the 2 forces cooperated, they were eager to fight, but they directly lost their target. They could only find another opponent to kill and stabilize the cooperation. At this time, Ling Ping, the marshal of the Dahan country, happened to be at the border of the Nanjiang country. It could be said that he was the most important person that they could immediately target at that time. Does the Nanjiang country want to fight with the Dahan country? Su Li was silent, and a cold light flashed in her eyes from time to time. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.